know if it's better. You hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Because when I put the camera on,
อาจารย์ค่ะเริ่มได้เลยค่ะ
Okay, we are streaming. So hello everyone, and then hello audience as well. Now we come to the last of our series on T-nomads, and this last one will be on uncertain futures, inclusivity, and policy in the making. And we are going to have 3 presentations today. The first one by Geoffrey Benjamin. Geoffrey is a senior associate in Southeast Asian Studies, School of Humanities, Nanyang Technological University. And he is also research director of Ethnographica, which is anthropological based consultancy firm. The second speaker will be Associate Professor Thanik Lertcharnrit. He's an archaeologist from Silpakorn University, and his specialization is cultural resource management. And the last one today will be Professor Supang Chantavanich, who's the advisor to the Asian Research Center for Migration, Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University, and I myself have the honor of presenting with Ajahn Supang as well. So we also have our colleagues here with us, Vivian Wee, who presented last time, Maxim Butri from Myanmar. He's with the Morgan Life Museum, and we have Melodia from Paris and Chong from Paris as well, and Chuck Ivanov. We're waiting for Fabienne to come in. She'll come in probably
you must be late.
from now. So may I invite Geoffrey Benjamin to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know whether my PowerPoint is shared. Let me check that that is so. Can you see this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, clearly. Thank you.
Okay. What I'm going to say today is extracted from a much longer work, a book which I'm completing, been working on for many years. Here are the chapter titles, and it's basically material derived from these 2 chapters here. But as you can see, the framework is a much wider look at the ethnohistory of the Malay world. So this is now finally nearing completion. In fact, I spent last year working on what eventually became 2 chapters, which I've shown here in red, devoted to the linguistic issues. And these largely concern the long-term interactions between the Austronesian and Austroasiatic language families that have occurred in what is now the Malay world. Wasn't always the Malay world, of course. Accordingly, these 2 chapters have the main title, The Austric Marchland. I've just taken the first part of the names Austronesian and Austroasiatic and put them together. This doesn't mean that I hold to Schmidt's ancient theory about Austric language family. That's not what I'm trying to maintain here. Now, I've not had time to incorporate the comprehensive materials that both Maxime and Jacques kindly sent me in the last few days. I knew some of this before, but I will certainly go through that material for further clues when I write this short talk up. Now, in following up on some recent language-based studies of the region, the Malay world, longer-term history, I found that I could not restrict the account just to Malay within Austronesian, nor just to the Aslian languages within Austroasiatic. The story is much more complicated than the standard versions still frequently told by writers on the region, and especially by writers in the region. And among the wider connections, it turned out that even the Moken and Moklen subgroup of Austronesian was part of the story. Now, they actually are situated just outside what I consider to be the Malay world in the book I'm writing, but on the periphery. So it turns out that they're not irrelevant, let's put it that way. Here are some of the sources I've been using. I don't know whether you can read these. I used a small font just to squeeze it all onto the screen, but here's some of the materials I've been looking at.
Right.
So I leave that there for just a short while. Now,
You please
recently,
make the bigger screen
I'm not
Yeah.
sure how much of
at
this
the
you can
bottom.
see. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, I should be doing it
Yeah.
down here.
Thank you.
This one.
That. Next one.
Oh. Can I make it bigger?
A little
Yes.
bit bigger.
This
No.
one.
Yes. That one.
Oh, okay. Okay. I
Okay.
didn't.
Yeah,
Thank
okay,
you.
now you are.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize that you would be seeing something differently from me. Okay, here you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to the previous screen. It's these two chapters in the book I'm still working on, which I've extracted this section on Moklen and Moklen from, and here are the some of the references that I've been using. Okay, let's move on. Recent investigation, primarily by Alexander Smith, who is a student or was a student of Robert Blust, the leading Austronesian specialist, research done from University of Hawaii. He has shown several important things that touch on the Moken and Moklen issue. First of all, he showed, I think quite conclusively, that the Moklenic subgroup is a top-level subgroup within Malayo-Polynesian, up here, of course. And it's therefore one of the very earliest arrivals in the region. I emphasize I'm talking about language, not people, not populations. Basically, what Blust and his student Smith have done is to do away with the idea that Western Malayo-Polynesian is a genealogically authentic Austronesian subgroup. It is not. It's proved impossible to reconstruct a proto-Western Polynesian, Malayo-Polynesian language. So there are some of the top-level subgroups that Smith has justified, and Moken is one of them. So it means that Moken is not a subgroup of anything else within Malayo-Polynesian. It's a top-level subgroup linguistically within all the Malayo-Polynesian languages, which means, of course, all the Austronesian languages outside of Taiwan. So that's rather important. It means that Moken linguistically has a very distinct history from all these other languages and language divisions we find in the western part of the Malayo-Polynesian language-speaking area. So the ancestor of Moklen must have been one of the very earliest arrivals in the region, at least 1,000 years before the Malayo-Chamic languages reached the mainland. We now know that the Malayo-Chamic languages first arose in northwest Borneo, then moved to the mainland by a very complicated series of movements, but depositing Chamic up here, of which Achinese, for some mysterious reason, is also a member. And of course, the Malayo group, which then moved into Sumatra and around Borneo, and then later, probably not much earlier, if at all, than 2,000 years ago, into the Malay Peninsula, where there already were other earlier Austronesian languages. They don't exist anymore, but they were very likely related to some other languages in a larger subgroup that Blust calls Greater North Borneo languages. The evidence for this is discussed elsewhere in the book I'm writing, and Blust himself has written on this. Now, in Malaysia, we only have Malay dialects and one other small, possibly Malayic language called Duano, which is also spoken on the east coast of Sumatra. That's all there is now. but previously we know, because of loan words left in the Aslian languages, that there were other Austronesian languages in the region before. But Moken had probably already passed by this area earlier, or the ancestors of Moken. In other words, the initial linguistic ancestor of the Moklenic division of Malayo-Polynesian has been in the region since around 3,500 years ago, possibly longer. And it's therefore likely that it was formerly spoken much more widely, including on both sides of the peninsula. And I'll talk about this later. But obviously, to have got here in the first place, it must have moved through this region. It couldn't have flown in, obviously. It came by sea from further east. It's therefore likely that it was formerly spoken much more widely, including both sides of the peninsula, than its current rather narrow distribution along the west coast of southern Myanmar and Thailand. The second point that comes out of this work is that this group of languages, Moklenic, as I think it's coming to be called in the literature, meaning Moken and Moklen, have been in contact linguistically with a variety of other languages, including Chamic, which is now restricted to this area, and Achinese is also Chamic, Malay, which now extends about that far up the peninsula, Austroasiatic languages, several subdivisions within Austroasiatic, the Aslian languages, which I work on in the field, Mon itself, which was previously spoken in this area, and Khmer from here, which we also know was spoken at various times as a political implantation possibly, or as a trade language. And there's even evidence of Khmer having been spoken by some traders extending down into the peninsula. So there's three different branches of Austroasiatic involved here in terms of what Moken has been in contact with. Aslian, which has been known for some time, since Lewis's study of Moken half a century ago. But also it looks like Mon and Khmer are involved as well. Also, I should say Nicobarese also, which is an Austroasiatic group of languages. There is evidence that Nicobarese and Moken have been in contact too, linguistically. Also, of course, more recently, Thai and Burmese. It goes without saying that they've also had contacts with Moken. Now, as shown in a later slide today, ancestral Aslian in particular would already have been present in the isthmus down here by 4,000 or more years ago. I'll show the evidence for that later. But Aslian, we have every reason to suspect, comes originally down from here. Its closest relatives are probably Mon and Nicobarese. Now, the most northernmost Aslian languages are some of the Mani northern Aslian languages spoken in the far south of Thailand, but presumably Aslian was spoken further north in the past. Now, all the rest of Aslian is spoken in Peninsular Malaysia, where there are about 20 Aslian languages. But it's safe to say that Aslian or some pre-Aslian or proto-Aslian, or perhaps proto-Mon, Nicobarese, some such grouping would have been spoken in this area in the isthmus 4,000 or more years ago. In turn, this is the third point, Moken itself has left lexical traces in several other Southeast Asian languages. And for this, I'm relying on the work of Arunotai, the Indonesian linguist, and Michael Hogevorst, the Dutch linguist or ethnologist, primarily those two. And this indicates that Moken speakers formerly played a bigger role in the region than they have done in more recent times. Both Mahdi and Hogevorst have suggested that around 2,000 years ago, people speaking ancestral Moken languages were involved in much more wide-ranging activities in this area as trade was opening up in the Indian Ocean and, of course, in the South China Sea. So among the authors who've noticed these connections are Lewis, who was a Malay scholar who wrote several excellent textbooks of Malay, but she did a monograph on Moken published in the Federation Museums Journal from Kuala Lumpur a long time ago. Michael Larish, who did his PhD thesis at Hawaii on Moken and Moklen, and with the reconstruction of the of the ancestral proto-language for those two languages, and as I've just mentioned, Mati and Hogerfors. Now, in the view of these authors, with varying emphases, the Australasiatic context of Moken and Moklen shows that they were formerly spoken more widely than their present distribution along the West Coast, which I've already tried to emphasize. One possible reason for this lexical exchange was suggested by Larish in his PhD thesis on the Moklenic languages. And I'll quote what he says there. He said, when land-based peoples,
Hello,
such as,
Geoffrey.
yes?
Can I ask you whether you are changing your slides?
Not yet, no.
Not yet? Thank you.
No, I haven't
Sorry.
changed it yet. I will be showing more slides later. So I'm keeping this on the screen as a kind of reference for you to follow where I'm talking about. I will bring up a linguistic slide shortly. So Larish in his thesis says, when land-based peoples such as Mon Khmers and Thais reached the sea, they probably had terminological gaps in ocean-related domains. Since Austronesian knowledge was notable in this area, meaning knowledge of maritime matters, Austronesian languages are an obvious source of borrowing. And this implies, and Larish also seems to hold this view, and I will talk about this later, it implies that ancestral Moklenic was also spoken on the Isthmian east coast, along the Gulf of Thailand, around this area, because that's the more likely area for them to have, for contacts with Mon and Khmer to have come about. So now, through historical phonology analysis, Mati, in a paper, several papers actually, but one particularly published in 2009, this one here, he demonstrated that ancestral pre-Morken, probably in the first millennium CE, supplied distinctive lexical items, including crop names for coconut, banana, and some other things, and also boat-linked vocabulary to a wider range of languages than its present-day shyly retiring speakers, the Mokens, are currently in contact with. And these included Mon, spoken up here, Batak, surprisingly, this area here in Sumatra, Malay, of course, throughout this more southerly area, Javanese down here, Chinese and Arabic, all spoken by traders passing through the region. Some nautical terms, words for boat or ship, word for sail, and word for paddle in particular seem to have reached parts of South and Southeast Asia through Moken. And of these, as I think most people know, the word kabang, meaning houseboat or ship, which is from the Proto-Austronesian, kabang with a Q at the beginning, is the most notable word. This is actually a key word, and you will find in the older literature the claim that this is a Khmer word. It is not. It really is an Austronesian word and goes back to Proto-Austronesian. But in the cognates of this word in all other Austronesian languages, the initial proto-phoneme written as a Q by most linguists has become a glottal stop or just an empty vowel. The fact that it became a K, as in kabang, a vela stop, is criterial that it came from Moken, because only Moken within Malayo-Polynesian did the proto-Q go to a K in that position. So it must have come from Moken. And I will, so here are some of the linguistic elements. I want to cross out a sentence I wrote here, which doesn't apply. Now, this slide shows some of the linguistic evidence. I'm still working on this, and I may be ditching some of this, and I may be adding to it. Importantly, I haven't yet presented this material to any relevant historical linguist for comments. However, I have tried to take a conservative approach. I've tried to obey as far as possible the rules of careful historical linguistic research in judging what these authors have done. And I haven't made too many leaps, too many jumps. Now, this evidence implies that the ancestral Moken speakers, as I've already said, formerly ranged over a broader expanse of coastal waters, as well as probably inland. And we know the Moklen speakers are still basically a land-based population, than they have done in recent centuries. And this indicates something of a wider role in the history of Southeast Asia. Both Mati and Hogervorst, for example, have suggested that Moken speakers were among the nomadic and sometimes so-called piratical groups who infiltrated the ancient trading networks along the coast of the Andaman Sea and beyond this area in the first millennium BCE. According to Larish, the Mokens would also have extended to an area that includes the peninsula's east coast and rivers. This area here on the east, as evidenced by the striking.
One second, Geoffrey. Fabienne just phoned me. She cannot find the link. Can you send her the link
to
Narumon?
To the literature or to this session?
To this session. She cannot find the link.
I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I will do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, according to Larish in his thesis, the proto-Moken Moklenic group language would have been spoken in this area too, and which would have enabled some of these lexical contexts that he talks about. And one of his reasons for saying this is that the evidence is what he calls the striking lexical and phonological convergences, which they happen to share with the Chamic languages, also spoken in this area, but which are Austronesian, but which have been greatly influenced by the phonological patterns of the Mon Khmer languages, the iambic pattern, instead of words pronounced with a rhythm da-da, become da-da, 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 which is typical Mon Khmer, with a reduced first syllable and so on. Chamic underwent that, and Moken and Moklen also show that same feature. Surprisingly, Larish regards these convergences as falling most consistently between Moken Moklen and the southeasternmost northern Aslian languages of Kelantan, Terengganu, and Pahang. Now, this is quite extraordinary. I think it's tentative, and I'm not sure he's proved his point. It would mean that these languages were formerly spoken on the coast, which is possible. They are not at the moment. And these are the languages of the more nomadic hunter-gathering groups amongst the Aslian speakers. Now, this he views as supporting the Moken's own oral history of having a former presence on the peninsular east coast, around here, in or around present-day Nakhon Si Thammarat. And I believe Jacques also has written about this. So their own oral history would possibly suggest that. Now, let's look at how possibly true these claims might be. Can I move on from this? Or do you need to look at it a bit more closely?
No, it's okay for us.
Okay. Today, when there are no Moken or Moklen speakers on the East Coast, nor indeed any Aslian speakers quite so far north in the isthmus, this reconstruction may seem far-fetched. However, as Briggs a long time ago in 1951 and Wheatley in 1961, and several later researchers have shown, a series of portage-based trade routes formerly traversed the narrow Isthmian section of the peninsula, routes 1 to 4 on this map, which I've taken from Wheatley. Leading from the Gulf of Thailand here on the east across to the Andaman coast, now inhabited down here by the Moklens and land-dwelling Moklens and their marine-orientated Moken neighbors and close linguistic relatives. There's a general map to try and keep this together. Thus, while the ancestral Mokens and Moklens may well have been traveling by sea around the full length of the peninsula, especially to reach the Andaman coast in the first place, the Moken languages could not have got here, surely, except by, at least in part, coming up through the straits a long time ago. On this view, they would also have been involved in the overland portage activities between the two coasts. So these portage routes are in this area of the isthmus. This would have brought them into contact with Northern Aslian or even Proto-Aslian speakers who would at that time have been present further north, but have since linguistically at least disappeared from that area. This would clearly also have a bearing on what you might call the Moklen problem, namely that if their language is so closely related to Moken, have the Moklens, as far as we know, always been land dwellers. I don't know how true it is that Moken and Moklen are still mutually comprehensible. I don't know, Jack can possibly comment on that, but they certainly are very closely related, which means they could not have diverged very long ago. So could the ancestral Moken or Moklen speakers originally have reached the west coast overland via these transisthmian portage routes, then occupied by, that's correct, or even Proto-Aslian speakers? Could some of them then have become secondarily sea-orientated Mokens? So maybe what was happening here led to the Moklens, and then some of the Moklens became the Mokens, possibly orientated towards the sea. This is all guesswork, I admit, but it's a hypothesis worth looking at. It's certainly possible, given the emerging first millennium BCE trade network in the Bay of Bengal out here, identified by Mahdi Hochefrost and, as I mentioned later, the archaeologist Berenice Bellina and her colleagues, as being an important element in this story. Alternatively, as Larish hints, perhaps the Moklens initially retained their East Coast homeland around here, while the ancestral Mokens went around the peninsula by sea, having already adopted a sea nomad culture. Maybe all of these patterns took place. And then any Moklens left behind on the east would then have assimilated to whatever was the dominant culture at the time, later Thais, earlier Mon speakers. Now, according to Wheatley, Larish, and others, the proto-historic trade routes across the isthmus started yielding in the 5th century CE to the southern maritime route through the Straits of Malacca, thereby lengthening the journey by up to an extra 4 months. But of course, as we know, shipping, staying in the ports on either side while waiting for the monsoons to change. That would have meant these portage routes across the isthmus here would have become possibly less important when that happened. The two subgroups, Moken and Moklen, could then also have met up on the west coast in the area they now inhabit. Any left behind members on the east coast would then presumably have assimilated, as I just suggested, into the local population. Now, either of these hypotheses is compatible with Larish's view that the earlier Mokens and Moklens were situated, and I quote what he actually said, he said, right on the connecting line between Champa and India, and involved in the east-west traffic between them. This hypothesis, however, would conflict with the fact that I've already mentioned that Moken and Moklen are said to be still mutually comprehensible languages, which supports Larish's suggestion that they separated quite recently, and he says at some time between 1300 and 1700 CE. just a few centuries ago. Now, if that is the case, those dates are actually rather interesting. Significantly, this relatively recent date of separation would correspond to the period, which I discuss elsewhere in the book I'm completing, when the Malay and Thai languages were also replacing Mon and Khmer along the isthmus, along with the associated religious shifts from Mahayana Buddhism on the part of the Malay speakers to Islam, and from Mahayana Buddhism on the part of the incoming Thai speakers to Theravada Buddhism. This was all happening sometime between 1200 and 1400 CE, a time that's extremely important, bringing about major political and social changes in Southeast Asia. So if Larish is right in suggesting that Moken and Moklen linguistically separated during that same period, that might be of some significance, suggesting that all of these developments were somehow directly connected. Larish therefore favors the view that the early Moken and Moklen homeland involved both sides of the isthmus, not just the west where they now live, as well as the formerly Aslian and Mon-speaking terrain between them. And he argues that interaction between Moken and Moklen with Chamic, which remember includes Achinese, and Austroasiatic must have been intense enough to produce the mainland type phonological changes that he sees as stemming, as I mentioned briefly earlier, from adapting to the typically iambic, or as we sometimes say, sesquisyllabic, 1.5 syllable Austroasiatic word final stress pattern. Now, I'm aware that Joe Pitayapon, who isn't here today, I don't think he is, he's argued actually that language internal factors were at least as important as contact in explaining these phonological changes, but possibly both factors were involved. Now, on the other hand, as I discuss in more detail later in the book, it's now recognized that in addition to Aslian, other Austroasiatic varieties, including both Mon and Khmer, were already present in the isthmus around the coast of the Gulf of Thailand, up to the time when these events I've just mentioned would be taking place. In other words, any typological convergences between these languages could well have resulted from what Blagden already in 1906 referred to as prolonged and intimate relations between different groups of language speakers in this region. Any such contacts would most likely date or have started from 2,500 to 1,500 years ago, when trade between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea was opening up via what is now the Malay world. Now, on the basis of the date that Blust has suggested, and seems to have been fairly well accepted by now, of 2,300 years ago for the spread of Chamic from Borneo to southern Vietnam here, what is now southern Vietnam, into an Austroasiatic speaking area. This area was formerly and still is largely occupied by speakers of Bahnaric languages belonging to the Austroasiatic subgroup. More recently, on the basis of that date suggested by Blust, Grant and Sidwell have in 2005, suggested that Proto-Moklenic must have been in place already in this area by 3,000 years ago. That sounds about right to me, could even have been earlier. They regard the shared typological features that I've just mentioned as resulting from a Sprachbund, or a linguistic area, emerging, or as they say, formed for a time that linked Moken and Moklen, Achinese, and Chamic, sometime after the separation of Malayic from Malayo-Chamic, but before the Thais and Burmese intruded linguistically into this Moken and Moklen speaking area. Okay, how do we apply some more concrete dates to this? Excuse me. Some recent work by the group of linguists working on the Aslian languages, who are mostly situated in Lund University in Sweden. They've done a lot of further lexical work, and in fact, which thoroughly replaces the lexico-statistical work I myself published in the 1970s. It's now replaced by this more recent work that they did, and here are the dates, suggested dates. Of course, there's a long range of possible range of error here, okay? But, and here's a little key map. Actually, this group of languages here in southern Thailand is no longer, 10N is an earlier name for this. This is the group called Manik nowadays. It's gone by several other names in the past. It's a Northern Aslian subgroup spoken by a very small number of people in southern Thailand who are now separate, have been separated for some centuries from their nearest linguistic relatives here in Malaysia and just over the Malaysian border in the other part of southern Thailand. So that map is meant to help you sort this out. So this break here between southern Aslian and the rest, these are the southern Aslian languages. Then another break between central Aslian and the northern Aslian languages. These are the central Aslian languages. These are the northern Aslian languages. These are mostly spoken by people who remain nomadic. These mostly by people who were Swidden farmers. These by people who were both Swidden farmers combined with trading in forest goods. So different lifestyles led to different patterns of language separation. So any such commonality suggested by Grant and Sidwell, a linguistic area in that area, would have emerged during the same period as some of the key splits were taking place further south in the Aslian languages, initially between southern Aslian and the rest, sometime before 3,000 years ago, and some later splits between central and northern branches of Aslian, approximately 2,500 years ago. Now, recent archaeological research, concisely summarized quite recently by Bérénice Bellina, Jacques and I were talking about her work earlier, and her colleagues, has confirmed the existence of maritime and trans-Isthmian trade networks linking the Indian and Chinese seas by what she identified as the mid-first millennium BCE. By what she calls the late centuries BCE, this led to the emergence of urbanized settlements on or near both coasts, both the west coast and the east coast, as well as specialized ornament and image manufacturing sites in the isthmus. These are only now coming under investigation. Her own and colleagues' major investigation has been at this site here at Khao Sam Keo, which seems to have been an early urbanized site, maybe 2 millennia ago. And here are some of the artifacts dug up from here. And what's interesting about them is some belong with the, come from the Indian, the Bay of Bengal area, some from on the contrary. These are typical ornaments. This is a Ling Ling O, which is found in Champa area of Vietnam and also in the Philippines. So this was these were being traded in the South China Sea. These beads, as I think most people know, have been traded into Southeast Asia for quite some time from India. And so these are the kind of artifacts that indicate that they're dug up from this site, but this site is on the port end of one of these Trans-Isthmian portage routes that I mentioned earlier. So Bellina explicitly states that social complexification in the region resulted not solely from external inputs, as has been proposed in much of the literature, but also, she says, from prior internal processes, which is very similar to my own argument presented elsewhere and is going to be elaborated on in the rest of the book, that social hierarchy in the Malay world also, further south, was generated initially by internal kinship processes, but in association with interlocality trading relations. If I go back to this is the article in which I have most explicitly spelt that out. Yeah, egalitarianism and ranking in the Malay world, but I've also mentioned it in some other places. But this will this a revised version of this will be a later chapter in the book I'm completing. Now, if some of the Moklen developments just discussed were indeed associated directly with these pre-state and indeed pre-Indianization processes, if you believe in Indianization, well, we know Sanskrit came into the region, we know all that, of course, and Indian religions, but these developments would have taken place just rather before these Indianization processes occurred in Southeast Asia. If that is so, these processes would have been underway sometime between 400 and 100 BCE, just short of 2,500 years ago, which is the date of the emerging urbanization at the Isthmian East Coast site of, which I just showed you here, this one here, and I don't know how to pronounce it properly, Khao Sam Keo, and elsewhere. The involvement of nomadic sea peoples in these developments is explicitly acknowledged in a very recent article, 2019, by Bellina, Favreau, and Dussubieux, who've summarized what they found in these sites. And it's hard to imagine that these sea peoples could have been really any other, I would have thought, than the ancestors of the Mokens, who on linguistic grounds, we know would already have been in place at that time because of the because their languages form a top-level subgrouping within Austronesian. Now, as already noted, these developments took place in parallel with the emerging presence in the region of the Malayo-Chamic languages, which also began to move out of Borneo into the mainland and through the islands around 2,500, 2,300 years ago. And this would account for the presence of Chamic items in the linguistic mix, which Moken is a part. See, for example, this item here, which interests me very much. Quite striking, I think. This is from my own fieldwork, this word here. It turns out to be related to the Cham word, apparently even the modern Cham word for king. And then this Moklen word, I assume this is Larish's proto Moklenic reconstruction, but I assume there is a modern Moken word which corresponds to this. That one is very striking, but there are several others too. There's this Temia word, Sabat. I've got virtually a whole chapter on this institution in my book on Temia religion, but its phonology, it is remotely related to the Malay word Sawan, but its phonology implies that it had to have got there via Moken. It could not have come via Malay. So again, something interesting there. Plus these rather interesting items here. I can't find any etymological sources for this word other than finding it's also in Moken and so on. So these are the kinds of things that I've been very interested in. That concludes what I have to say today, but this isn't really a conclusion, as the issues, of course, are still left open for further investigation. But I hope I've said enough to suggest that there is more work to be done. I'm not the worst person to do this, so it needs some real linguists. I'm kind of a linguist, but I'm definitely not an historical linguist. For that, I rely on the work of people like Blust and Gerard Diflot and Larish and Paul Sidwell and writers of that kind. I have to rely on their work. I can't trust myself to do any reconstruction work of my own. So that's the end of my presentation today.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. It was very, very interesting. It raises a lot of questions. I have some in mind. Maybe others would like to ask questions first.
If I may,
Jacques.
Because you asked
Yes.
me, Geoffrey, what I think about the Moken and Moklen relationship when they speak together and the relation between the eastern and the western coast. What you said, in fact, is a summary and let's say, a nice design of what I have heard of people, historians like Mangin, who always speak about this word kabang. Yes, we have a, unfortunately, we start again, that's another story. We start again to start to have a dictionary of the maritime words among the Austronesian and compare all these words. And so we have started this work with 800 and compare, but is already, of course, not finished. And we find that this was the southern, let's say, in naval technology, about southern link, of course. And then there was it's just spot I got. I will tell you. The second one is from Pelras. I don't know if you know Pelras, who working on the boogies.
Yes.
Yes, and Pelras was in my PhD when he told me that there was, in fact, on the western coast, of course, relation with the Bugis and the Malay, and then you can imagine a lot of other things on the eastern coast. He was the first one to point out that this eastern coast could be linked to the Moken and Moklen, and he was right. And then we have another one who spoke about the Chamik and say that maybe there is a link also. Remember, who was that? I don't know. Maybe it was Audricourt. But who told me that there is a link between the Chamik and the Moklen as well. And it was Audricourt for sure who linked and who explained me the differences. I don't have the time framework, but the differences was how the Moken went through south and then Rio, and then east coast of Sumatra, because the change of what you said is a Q, and I'm not good at Q to Q, this kind of changes. So he explained me that, of course, the Moken have to be there before because they speak exactly what you said. So what you said exactly remained the Chamik, why there is some Chamik influence, why there is some Chinese. We know that the Moken went first there and then the change and so on and so on. So you designed a nice picture of what could have happened. I agree that could have happened, but I am not a linguist, so I cannot say that linguistic will be proof strong enough to declare that they are coming from this or this part. You have to rely that discussion I have with Larish on the fieldwork with the Moklen, which is always a very complicated task. And what you point out on the Moklen is exactly the question that everybody is raising between the relation on the eastern and western coast. And if what you said is right, and yes, I will agree on that, that there is some separation and split and of the population going through the eastern coast and then on the western coast, and then there is a transition from eastern to western and not only western from eastern. Yes, but the timeline is not for me is not it's a little bit confusing, I would say. It's difficult to rely to all the data we have now, and how will I put it? I will say that the Moklen in this situation, in the design you make, the linguistic design of this geographical population, the center is the Moklen. The Moklen are exactly at the center of this. And in the Moklen language, it's a very hard language for me, because when, for instance, you speak with them in Moken, they will understand. if they speak to me, I will understand maybe 50%. So when I put Moken with Moklen, absolutely no problem. They can switch Moken to Moklen. But there is a strong tendency for the Moken to switch to Moken when they are interacting. And if they live together, which happens very often, both intermarriage and so on, you can speak Moken and you can speak Moklen. There is absolutely no problem. They understand each other very clearly. But there is a clear, and that I agree with Larish on that the last, let's say he said from the 14th or 13th century or to the 17th century, that there was a split between the Moklen and the Moklen, maybe, yes. And I do agree on that. And that will say that the Moklen was there first, and yes, again. And this is this link is kept by these two populations. And at the level of any rituals, any social facts you mention, you would say, if you speak with the Moken and the Moklen, when they are together, there is a kind of hierarchy, I would say. The Moken are let's say, the more respected population. Because they are, I don't know, strong hunter, whatever they think, and the Moklen seems very, land dweller and mangrove things, and they are not so strong, I would say. So when you interact with Moken and Moklen, the Moken are always taking the lead. But when it turns to language and ritual, you find that the Moklen are much more involved in local ritual, whether Buddhism, Mon, even Chinese, and I have seen, and I am trying to put that on a digitalization. I have seen maybe 20 to 30 different rituals among the Moklen, and it goes from the Malay theater to Manora, and through strange things which I never see anywhere, and I cannot relate it. That's why I want to digitalize all this ritual I have record. And they have a memory of words, yes, of a lot of language, which can be linked to all these rituals again. And so the difference with Larish and I, when we try to work together, is I always try to link let's say, the ritual and the language to say that, for instance, if they perform a Malay, some kind of topeng thing, but it's turned to be a shamanic thing, says there is a special language. And then if they perform a kind of manora, which is a southern Thai dance, and it's another language as well, another ritual. So in fact, the Moklen are a kind of a pivot of all this system of Moken in the north, of Moklen or whatever, or Chamic things in the east. So I will, what you said, I will agree that they come from they might have come from the east, and bringing all this knowledge and words, different, the Mon and the Shamic things and everything. And then there was a split very clearly between the 15th, I will put it between the 16th century, between the Moken and the Moken. And this is starting with the 16th century, 17th, this I can show it before. I don't know, this is what you show, is too far from my knowledge. So what I want to say is, yes, there is a strong possibility to put Moken and the Moken on the East Coast and then on the West Coast at the same. and then have a point of a larger, whatever, what time, I don't know, but there is let's say, the kind of network was much more important than it is now. But the link between the beads and all the prehistorical things and all the Indian and, let's say, all the historical fact, and the Moken and Moklen absolutely didn't know and don't want to speak about them. Strangely enough, the Moklen lives on land when there is a lot of archaeological sites, and they are very close to what we call the port entrepot. I don't know how you call that in English. You know the port entrepot?
Yeah. Yeah, we
Yes.
just speak the French.
When I work, yes, I work with Ergouache quite a lot, and Beredit also. But I work with Ergouache, and I went with him to see this location, the Moklen location, the village. And clearly for him, there were a population living in this port entrepot already as, whoever know, I don't know, slave or transborder, whatever, or loading things, or I don't know. But clearly for him, it was linked, even the word, because the Moklen called themselves sometimes Kala, or on Kala, and Kala is a word which can be, well, I don't pronounce it good. Kala, it's a word which can be an Indian, but it can be also the golden coast, the sea. So they call themselves Orang Kala sometimes, some of them. And I send you the paper I write with somebody on this work. So for Ergouache, there is no question that all these port entrepot and smaller points are located where the Moklen are located, not the Moklen. All the Moklen are located, and this is why, the reason why, for him, and I mostly agree, that it's a very teeny, that means 12 or 15 villages on a few hundred, 200 kilometers. I don't know, I'm not very good at the number. And he said, yes, they certainly regroup there. Was there a slavery putting them here? Was there here because it was a need of being, so I don't know. But clearly the center has an historical point of view, and according to Ergouache, the meeting point is clearly where the Moklen are, because it means it's a link between the Indian and the western coast of Thailand, and then going to the eastern coast. So we talking with him, it was more easily to design something coming from Moken, being separate from Moklen at a certain time of 16th century. Yes, I could do it, as Larry told. And then after you go to the Moklen center, which have the various things from everywhere, from Malay, Mon, and whatever you want, you have it in the Moken and Moklen world. You can find anything you want in their language and ritual. And then coming to historical things, yes, they can be the people who have been to the Eastern, and as we say, transborder from Transmispen Road and so on. Yes, so that we agree on this model, I will say. But I tell you, I was always this little voice telling me that from Eastern, they can have been there and cross east to west, always, because Manguin and because Odrico have put that in my mind that it could have been on both ways, like you said. And so I have to be very careful. Yes, I can reconstruct on the western coast, but on the eastern coast as well, it could be probably involved. And but at that time, we didn't know as much as we know and as we tell. And now I understand why they could not do, and let's say, put the line between the question mark we had at the time. So what you said, in fact, you know, between the Chamic, the Chinese, and the Western inspection and so on, yes, clearly match this pattern. We just have to adjust it, and maybe, like you said, enlarge the view that the more clinic, as you say, is larger than we saw. And of course, I will agree on that, but it's not easy to prove. And I will not link it very also easily to archaeological finding, because that's my biggest question. And the strong refusal of Moken to be involved in any kind of recording of, let's say, I take you material things. Even if they live on a port au some of them live on them. You can dig it. We make it with air wash, and you find it. And you have a Moklen village on the top. So of course they should know something. So either there is two way of seeing that. Either there is a kind of we forget that's a Moklen technique, a strategy, I would say. We switch it another time, we switch another period, and then we forgot everything, and then we go to it's an adaptation. Let's say, I don't know, the Thai arrive, as you say, maybe it could be anything. So they don't want to hear anything about that, and then they renew their culture. They separate Moken from Moklen, and then you go to, let's say, modern history, 16th century. That will I will say it's a possibility that they put a blank on all these historical things, but for cultural purpose. And this is possibly because when you see the Moklen living among the all the wreckage of this port entrepot everywhere, and as they are really stuck to this point, it's very clear that there is something. And when you see the density of their ritual, you see there is something, and when you see the language, you see there is something much more deeper than in the Moken, which in fact, it's more, I would say, easy and clear. So yes, I would agree that the main question for me is how to relate the Eastern migration up to Nakhon Tamarat, which I agree is a point of a meeting. And yes, there was Moklen definitively in Nakhon Tamarat. I went in Nakhon Tamarat. I know the people in some pagoda, and I have read some paper, but I not read Thai, so probably saying that the Moklen cannot go in some pagoda. They were forbidden to go there. So there is, again, historical proof, but very scarce proof that the Moklen were there at the time, coming from the West or stating from the East, I don't know. As I tell you, with Alguash, we decide that it fits very well with our theory. But now that you say that the Eastern in the front, let's say, would have been conquered within that same time framework of the Western one, that could be very well, that will fit very well. But how we do that? How we do this Eastern, because you show us some data from the Eastern way that the Moken could have been there, but how can we go further to study that even in a linguistic field? Because where do you start?
Well, more loanword studies would help, but that's a difficult area. It needs linguists who work across several different language families. There's certainly a fair bit of Mon in southern Thai, for example, which is significant in the area near Nakhon Tamarat. I just want to say one thing about Gualchi's work, which of course is very important. However, he seems to, not seems to, he definitely did assume that these proto urbanization sites up in the isthmus were already Malay speaking, and I think that's quite wrong. I think
yes,
yeah.
no.
He doesn't even mention the possibility that they might have been Mon or Khmer or something else. We
That's
know
right.
they would not have been Thai at that. They would not have been linguistically Thai that early. That's for sure. So that's one problem. But otherwise, I find his work very, very useful.
No, but I do agree that yes, what he said about the Malay is quite easy because he needs to get away with all the things in order to get in all the fields. So that's why it goes so easy to say that the Malay. That was the reason.
Well, I think he was just picking up on the fact the Malaysians insist that Tambralinga and Langkasuka were Malay. I don't think they were, not linguistically at least. Yeah,
I agree on that. Because basically you want to get rid of the
Geoffrey, in the chapters, the draft chapters you kindly shared with us, the one you were mentioning, referring to, you put a great emphasis in the introduction. You did in the presentation too, but it was quite quick, on the fact that we must differentiate migration of language and migration of people. So from that point of view, could this explain what Jack just said about the fact that Moklen retain a very great diversity of rituals, but also associated languages, so that maybe it would be have been more a migration of languages rather than people.
Yeah. I've not, in what I've said today, I've not intended to make any implication about population movements. That has to be dealt with as a separate matter. But what I've been saying does have implications, of course, about language movements, whether or not carried by whole population movements, but also importantly, language contacts. Which let me give you an example. The movement of Chamic from Borneo to what is now southern Vietnam, the genetics shows that the people who now speak Chamic languages in that area are not, in fact, genetically closely related to Bornean peoples at all. What that means is that for some reason, Chamic speakers reached the mainland at that point and then merged in some way linguistically with the Badnarik speakers there, but the Chams in South Vietnam are, as a population, descendants of Badnarik speakers, Austroasiatic languages. They are not, they're not primarily genetically linked with the Austronesians. The same is true with the Munda languages in India. We know phenotypically, we can see the Munda languages which are Austroasiatic, but their speakers clearly look Indian. But the evidence is that for some reason or other, Proto-Munda was inserted into that part of India by just a small number of male speakers. The genetics emphasizes that connections in the male line. So the sociolinguistics of these early language movements are really quite complicated and raise all kinds of questions. They can't be explained naively by saying these languages were brought by massive population movements. That really won't work. It simply won't. In some cases, might have been. In the Pacific, yes, because the Pacific was empty of human habitation. But in Southeast Asia, there were people here already speaking other things, so much more complicated.
And on another point, the theory of a segmentation between Moklen and Moken during probably 13th or 16th century quite fits well with the myth Pitayawat was mentioning, the one I was mentioning too, the myth of Gaman, which directly relates the flight of the Moken to the arrival of Malay and Islamization and
Could I ask both of you, Maxime and Jacques, is it the case that the idea that Moken and Moklen are two distinct languages is an artifact of having just studied one sample of each, or is there possibly a dialect chain between them on the ground?
I will speak as a non-linguist. What I feel when I make this field work with Christopher Court among the Moklen is that the Moklen are a very, very receptive and adaptable population, linguistically speaking. They can tonalize, detonalize, Mokenize, whatever you want, they can do it with their language. In a village, you have, I shall tell you, 3 tones. In another one, you have only 5 and then 7. It depends of the tie there, if they have 7 tones and so on. So they can tonalize, detonalize, they can speak with the moan and a lot of moan appear. And it seems, you know, there is an endless possibility for the Moklen to have, let's say, a segmentation of a part of the population going, let's say, like the Moken, and keep only part of the language, let's say the Malay one. Even if in Moken there is only 50% of Malay and thing. Yes, I will say that maybe that the Moken, I would say the Moken is a dialect or a segment of the Proto-Moklen. That means the Moklen we were before any strong interaction. And because this ability to change and switch language and to adapt and to still keep the possibility to speak to everybody make me feel that the Moken, in fact, are only just one part of these whole opportunities of, you know, dialect. So that's why the Moken is much more clear than the Moklen. So yes, I would say that the Moken are a dialect, can say, and then it takes its own liberty and then borrow word from the Thai and so on, and then more, and it diverges more and more.
That sounds very like the linguistic situation among the Northern Aslian speakers, who also, as individuals, speak each slightly differently from each other, and also vary from one moment to another in their phonology to some extent. And this has been written up by the linguists who worked on this, and it's got to do with their long-distance marriage patterns and, of course, nomadism historically.
And is that to do, and also there is another fact, that's why I wanted Sater to be there, because these binomial things, that mean to have a littoral population within a population living in the highland, that means is quite a good strategy to survive and to extend and to have a network. We know Moken from the north part to have a daughter which are married with the people of Lanta, that means Uaklawoy from the north, that means a few hundred kilometers. Now, that means the strategy is really to, you know, to keep on a kind of link. And so I have seen myself, people, Moken, tired of being Moken, going back and destroying their own kabang and settle on land. So I have seen it. I have movie of that. They destroyed their boat. That was very striking for me. I said, but what are they doing? And they say, we are tired of being chased or whatever. And then they settle in a Moklen village, and they intermarried and so on. But one thing is, when the Moken arrive in the Moklen village, it's the Moken which is spoken. Very strangely, it's more strong, I will say, that they are more, they feel like more strong. But in fact, the Moklen, even if they play the game of being inferior to the Moken shaman, which is the big, if you have that's why I spoke about the ritual. In fact, the interaction in the language, which make the population, Moken, Moklen, easy to understand, is that when they make some ceremony, you came, and I did that a few times, with the Moken shaman, it will be the Moken shaman who will take the lead, whether Uaklawoy or Moklen. So, and then the language in this ritual, but it's not Moken, as I tell you, it's more, as I call it, Malay, but it's kind of Malay, you will tell me later. So you see there is a kind of strange pattern there. That it means there is a link, even in linguistic, you can find in the rituals, and you can find that the Moken are up on are the star of the show. But linguistically speaking, they are the Moklen who are the one who make the private system works. Because they are the people who have the most of ritual, they are the people who link the Moken, the Raklawoy, and so on and so on. This is why I told you about rituals and this language bring by ritual or kept. They don't kept the physical things of the past, but yes, they kept it. The ritual is very clear that it's the Malay time, and they tell it. Now it's a Malay show. It's like a theater in the ritual. The first ceremony I saw, there is a day for the Malay. It's a Malay day. So it's a Malay game. There is the chicken, the fish, and so on. It's a mostly they tell you we came from that, let's say, matrix. I will say I don't know exactly what they think when they do that, but they recognize that in the ritual being important. One day of the 3 days has to be from the Malay, speaking Malay, and with specific game, trends, and so on. So they recognize a kind of relation. Of course, do you bring that with the linguistic or not? It's difficult to say. But I will suggest that if they refuse to be linked to physical things and keep so strong ritual things and language, maybe it's just a blend. They want to go something else. For Entrepot is finished, all this story of transitional is finished, so now they move forward. They go to Manora because it's Thai, and in Myanmar they will go to I don't know what, and so on and so on. And then they will keep that for all themselves and share between them, because there is a sharing with the Moklen. Narumon knows that very well, also with the Moklen who share in all the pagoda in the 10 months ceremony, where you find Moklen and Waklawoy in all the pagoda because they are linked and so on. So you see, it's a very deep. As I was telling, I don't remember the link but to Berenice. The link is very deep. The network she's trying to find is deeper when she saw it, because when the Uraklawoy or the Moklen are interacting for this 10 months ritual, it's quite impressive. That means the Moklen are the psychopomp. That means the population will bring the bad things which the Thai Buddhists have done. And then it's the Moklen who takes the offering to these dead, the dead people who have been offended by the Thai inner. It is the Moklen who takes the offering and bring back to their own village to make their own ceremony. And then you have also ceremony between the Uraklawoy and the Moklen, and so on and so on. So you have, I don't know, dozen of this kind of thing. But the main 10th month ceremony, for me, is clearly a sharing of resources. You have 1 month when the Uraklawoy, Moklen, and Moken, because when there is Moken as well, so all this free population go to all the pagoda in streets and settle in Panga, in the town of Panga, and they settle in the Chinese quarter, and they can do whatever they want. And they go and gather every day for 1 month, and nobody would say anything. So to me, it's a sharing of resources. That means the Uraklawoy are recognized with the Moklen and Moken as being the people of the sea, and then they renew the contract with the Chinese, who are the, I don't know, tin miner or whatever you want, and the Thai who are maybe the right. I will just put very extreme schematic things, but well, in my mind, it's a sharing of territory and resources, which is renewed every year. This means the
there is a good article on this by
Olivier Ferrari. You should read it.
Ferrari. Do you read French?
Yes.
Yes.
Benjamin, read it.
Geoffrey, yeah, okay.
Yes.
So I will share it to you. Yeah, this
Okay, thank
article.
you. Yes.
All right. I don't know, maybe you want to react, Geoffrey, or are
Not
there
really.
other questions?
I'm very thankful for all these comments, which I've been writing down and will think about. And as I said, I will, when I come back to writing this up, I will certainly read the materials you sent me in the last week or so, which should
Okay.
certainly fill out a lot of these empty areas in the story.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
There are still a
Thank
lot.
you.
Yeah. Thank you. So I don't know if there are other questions for Geoffrey before we move to Dr. Thanik Lertcharnrit. Sorry, with my pronunciation.
The real archaeological stuff.
No, so I propose we move to Dr. Thanik presentation.
Okay, so I don't know if you have much to contribute, to this kind of topic on the kind of linguistic stuff. I know very little about the language and also about the nomad history, but I have worked on some archaeological sites in southern Thailand and also central Thailand. So what I am going to do is to present some of the evidence, mainly prehistoric archaeological evidence from the beginning of the human peopling of Southeast Asia up until around the time period that you saw the trade kind of intensive trade network like during the Middle Age and the time that like Geoffrey mentioned about the site like Khao Sam Keo and other sites in southern Thailand that has that contains a lot of evidence of a trade network between people in different parts of Asia. Okay, so let me go to my PowerPoint.
Everybody with the PowerPoint have always problems, huh?
Yeah. See, is it on now or
No.
oh?
Still on the show.
Yeah. Well, my talk is pretty much about the cultural history of human settlement in southern part of Thailand and central Thailand. Come on, okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so this is just the topic, human migration and movement during the prehistoric period in southern Thailand and central Thailand, based on the archaeological evidence. Okay, well, currently, according to the current evidence about the earliest people who moved into Southeast Asia, it began around. If we don't count Homo erectus, okay, we talk about Homo sapiens, our kind of direct ancestor or the direct ancestor of modern humans. We have evidence of Homo sapien move into Southeast Asia around 60 to 50,000 years ago. Okay, with the oldest remains of the actual remains of Homo sapien, of probably the first modern humans in this area, was found at a cave site Tham Paling in Laos. This is the photo of the figure of the oldest remain, the fossil remains of the people. But there are not many remains of early people during this time, but most of the evidence that we found is just about the tools, stone tools, okay, and side with some evidence of animal bones and stone tools rather than the fossils. Okay. Since 50 or 60,000 years ago, we saw the migration of the Homo sapien across Southeast Asia, both mainland and island. Okay, so this photo just shows some of the fish hooks found in Indonesia, okay, of the Alor Island, dating to around 12,000 years ago, which are quite similar to those found in Japan on the Okinawa. So maybe it might suggest that the spread of human being in the ancient time, pretty further across South Asia and also Australia and also some southern part of Japan, living, bringing them with some cultural tradition, the use of osseous materials or the use of some part of animal tissues like shells, bone, horn, to make tools or ornaments. Like this one, these are the shell beads, okay, found in Timor-Leste about almost 40,000 years ago. Okay, and the use of shells as a body ornament or personal ornaments has we can trace it back to at least 80,000 years ago, at least. Okay, or maybe 100,000 years ago. Okay, and it was continue until today. Okay, like the shell beads. Like this have been found not only in island South Asia, but also in mainland South Asia. And based on my experience of digging site in Lopburi province, central Thailand, I have found a lot of shell beads, but those date to the Iron Age or around 2,000 years ago. Okay. But the history of the use of shell as ornaments is very long. It has a very long history, okay, in human history. And also this kind of, I would say, the legacy of cultural tradition that we can trace back to the earliest Homo sapiens, the use of animal canines to make ornaments like pendants or beads like this. Okay. This one was found at a cave site in southern Thailand at Mo Kieu cave site, one of the oldest site with human remains in Thailand and South Asia. Okay, Mo Kieu cave site is about 75,000 years ago. It was dug by one of my former teachers, Professor Surin Pukajon. He passed away several years ago. He first dug the site and found the oldest remains of what we say Homo sapien, or the first human in Thailand. Okay, so sorry, I didn't put the remains of the human, but I show this kind of ornaments as to say that this form of ornaments, the animal canines with perforated hole that were used as maybe a neck or necklace, okay, also began very early in human history, and it was continuing almost everywhere in the world, and this is one of the oldest one in Thailand. And for my excavation at the site in Lopburi, I also found similar things. This is the two animal canines pendants, okay, made from small mammal, okay, the canine of small mammals, okay, during the Iron Age. And at site in Nakhon Sawan, also north central Thailand, a number of shells, pendants that were made in imitation of animal canines. Okay, since they could not hunt a lot of animals just to get the canines, they just use shells, okay, seashell, to make the ornaments in the imitation or in the form of the canine. Animal canine. This is very interesting things. I don't know if the sea nomad or the Austronesian have used or made or fashioned this kind of things. But this was found since very early times up until maybe today in some ethnic groups. Okay. So maybe just to show the long history of some of the cultural traditions or the cultural package of the ancient people. And this is the photos of rock arts in Sulawesi. It is claimed that it is the oldest animal figure in the world, 60 or over 60,000 years ago. Okay, and also the hand stencil. So also the figure on the right side is the hand stencil. Okay, and also hand stencils have been found all over the world, anywhere in Africa, in Asia, and Europe, and almost everywhere where Homo sapiens enter, where Homo sapiens colonize, in the Americas, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, so almost everywhere, So it looks like they have there are some, I don't know, it's like universal cultural tradition, that were first invented and then transmitted and practiced, over and over, over several generations until the recent time or very recently. Okay, and this, and South Asia is not the terra incognita. Is is the place where we have found a lot of evidence of common treasure, common heritage of the early people. Okay. See, just other photos of the hand stencils and rock art in South Asia, okay, in island South Asia that are pretty old. I don't know if at the time it seems like in terms of linguistic evidence, is there any Austronesian language spoken around, or we don't have any clear evidence about the link of the prehistoric rock art or rock paintings or rock engraving to the sea nomad or the Austronesian speaking people. Okay, but I want to show that in mainland island South Asia there were things like this. Okay, since a long time ago. Okay, even in later periods like the what we call maybe the Hominian or the Mesolithic period, or maybe the end of the lifestyle that would have focused mainly on hunting gathering or lifestyle that we saw. They had found the tools, stone tools, making that were fashioned for hunting, collecting, or cutting animals. Okay, no evidence of farming at the time, but the other traditions that were continued from earlier period, like the use of the making of rock art, the use of bone tools, and the technique of stone tool production. Okay, have been again found all over South Asia. Okay, again, we are sure if this form of artificial remains were related to the Austronesian. This is one of the oldest earlier or one of the earlier sites in southern Thailand, Lang Long Rian rock shelter, Pheng Pha Lang Long Rian in Krabi province in the western coast of the peninsula or on the Andaman side, like Mo Kiao Cave in the same province in Krabi province. Okay, so Doug Anderson from Brown University have found a lot of stone tools dating back to like 37 or almost 40,000 years ago. Okay, so one of the early sites in southern Thailand. But it looks like not until the time that we saw during the early Holocene or around the end of the Pleistocene or the end of the time that people might began the new subsistence strategy, maybe farming or some form of horticulture, that we saw a new tradition, a new ritual tradition, a new ritual behavior as the interment of individuals in certain form or certain position, like this photo show the flex burials. Okay, that might be the diagnostic tradition of the hunter-gatherer, the last hunter-gatherer in South Asia, like this one from southern China and also from Vietnam. And similar burials of this position have been found by one of my colleagues, Professor Rasmi Chu Songdet, who dug site in Mahang Son province at like the Ban Rai rock shelter. She also found a burial with flex burial. Some archaeologists or some scientists have assigned this form of burial to hunter-gatherer, okay, which merely have nothing to do with the Austronesian speaking people. Maybe they might be related to the early migrant from maybe from Africa into South Asia or into Asia, the early groups of Homo sapien. Okay. So these are just a map showing sites with flex burials that have been found all over South Asia, but not very many. Most of, I have to say that most of sites with flex burial have been found in caves rather than in lowland or in the area near the coast. Okay, so it looks like they are this form of burials tend to be related to group of hunter-gatherer, okay, rather than farmers. Okay, yeah, just more photos showing site with hunter-gatherer burial practice with flex burials. Okay, like in Thailand, the separate cave or Thampi in Mae Son province that led to travel or around the end of the Pleistocene or the early Holocene. We saw the new, maybe the new forms of subsistence strategy, collecting horticulture or slash and burn. I don't know, but it looks like the artifactual remains tend, like stone tools, tend to suggest that they perform some kind of well, they were highly mobile people. But still, they use cave for ritual practice, and they made sure that have a capacity to cut small trees, like digging stick, you know, to dig some tubers or food from plants. Okay, that might suggest that they start to perform sedentary settlement, stay in one place, or semi-sedentary settlement pattern. Okay, that might lead to later the farming practice. Okay, like site in Lampang province, recently excavated by one of my colleagues and French archaeologists at Doi Pakan in Lampang province. They found barrels with some grave goods like stone tools and red ochre that were used for, you know, painting rock art. So the again we saw the continuity of rock art production, you know, since Paleolithic to Mesolithic, and also down to Neolithic and later periods as well. Okay. So this is sorry, yeah, I have photo of the oldest oldest fossils of Homo sapiens in southern Thailand, like this one from Mokyo Cave in Krabi province, with some of the pendant or ornaments. Okay, so yeah, the site with flex burials that was dug by my colleagues, one of my colleagues, Professor Rasmi Suchongret in Mae Son province with flex burial. Okay, so around 12,000 years ago. Okay, yeah, the rock arts and also artifactual remains found at the Doi Pakan. That might relate that might suggest that the art production, rock art, you know, was performed by people who live in the near the or at the rock shelter since at least 12 to 13,000 years ago. Okay, and later period at a nearby site in Lampang province, there are rock arts dated to around 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. That's, you know, contemporaneous with the Neolithic period. Okay. So maybe the continuity of the rock art production. Okay. Yeah, well, talking about Austronesian speaking people, some archaeologists like Peter Bearwood or Matthew Sprigg and Charles Heim tend to believe that the Austronesian speaking people were farmers, maybe a rice farmer, who once lived in China, southeastern China, and then they migrated into Taiwan, and then from Taiwan they spread to island Southeast Asia, to Philippines and Indonesia and some part of southern Thailand. Or some group of these people migrate from southeastern China to Vietnam, like Geoffrey mentioned a cycle in coastal Vietnam, and there are sites dating to the Neolithic period in northern Vietnam as well. Okay, that I don't know if it is true that speaking Austronesian speaking people were farmer. Okay, were farmer from southern China. Okay, so we tend to have then they were moved southerly or into Southeast Asia around, I would say, 4,000, 5,000 years ago with some cultural package, as I will say later on. Like I mentioned Matthew Sprigg paper that he mentioned the Austronesian and Neolithic package, like the use of the making of shell eggs, shell beads, fish hook, jar barrels. Jar barrels is very interesting. New form of mortuary practice, jar barrel. That we haven't seen any jar barrel during the Mesolithic and Paleolithic period. So jar barrel were found that had been found in South Asia began to appear around the Neolithic period, 4,000-5,000 years ago. Okay, and we have a site that I will show you in Thailand that has several jar barrels during the Neolithic period. Okay. See, well, if you go back to southern Thailand, see, this is very interesting site, the Sakai Cave in Trang province. Again, it was dug by my former teacher, late Professor Surin Pukajan, back in the 90s, that he found a barrel with distinctive way or tradition that's or different from the earlier period, from the Mesolithic or Neolithic or Paleolithic barrels. That more grave goods, okay, more grave goods and some of the pottery. As you can see from this barrel, you see shell, bivalve shell as offering, polished stone axe, okay, pottery. So new toolkit, okay, all two tradition that have been found, that have been used and mass. I don't know. This is probably one of the early farming barrels of farmers. Okay, if we think that stone axe were used for cutting tree, or they are the agricultural tools. Okay, so 7,000, 8,000 years ago, based on radiocarbon dating, for C14 dating. Okay, so very early, and this is another part of South Asia. This is southern Thailand. I don't know where the ancestors of these people come from. Are they from China? I'm not sure about this. So maybe DNA analysis might help resolve this problem. Who are the ancestors of this group, of this individual, or where they come from, or they were those hunter-gatherer who live in southern Thailand, like Mo Kiao Cave or Lang Long Rian rock shelter, or site in Indonesia and Malaysia. Okay, that they change their lifestyle. Okay, or the new group that migrate into this part. But it looks like their cultural practice, the stone axe, okay, and the pottery, are quite kind of novel, like a new artifacts that have never been found at sites dating to Neolithic or older than 8,000 years ago. Okay, well, we know that the earliest pottery were made in northeastern China or in Japan around 18,000 years ago, like the Jomon in Japan, or people in the area between China and Russia, so in the Russian Far East, 20,000 years ago. But those were simple form of pottery, and they are earthenware. Okay, but the pottery that were found with this guy is very elaborately made. They were polished. Okay, and it looks like they have ritual function rather than use function as pots or cooking pots. Okay, so maybe new form, new ideas, new ritual behavior. Okay, that is associated with maybe a new group of people. But again, I'm not sure if this group of people or early farmers. But what kind of plant did they find? Still a big question to me. Since there haven't been collect any paleo ethnobotanical remains at the site, so no isotope study to see what kind of diet they consume. So maybe future study about the DNA, archaeobotanical remains, and so on might help resolve who were these people or where they came from. Okay, but there are more and more burial of this tradition have been found in southern Thailand, starting from at least 8,000 years ago to around 3,000 years ago. like in Trang province, like this one. This is newly excavated site, cave site in Satun. Also on the Andaman coast of southern Thailand. Okay, so like similar to the that rock shelter in Trang province as well. So similar form. So the extended barrel. Okay, so the form, the position of the individual is positioned in the extended barrel, not in the flex barrel. Okay, so Hayam used to say that this form of position, I mean, extended supine barrel, tend to relate to the Austronesian speaking or early farmers in southern China who brought with them the millet and rice cultivation, okay, and also pottery production as well. Okay, but this site also very interesting that not only pottery but also this kind of bracelet, okay. This form of bracelet that were first mentioned were one of a PhD student who just got who got his PhD from Australian National University, I think in 2008 or 9. I have his dissertation with me. That he mentioned that he studied this kind of ornament bracelet. They call it T-section bracelet. Okay, the oldest one was found in China 8,000-9,000 years ago in northeastern China in the Yangtze River Valley. Okay, very far, and so people in that time they were farmers, right? So rice was cultivated around 8,000-9,000 years ago in China for the first time, and they also they made this one, and made this kind of form of ornament, arm ornament. Okay, so this form, this type of ornament has been found all over South Asia, mainland and island. Okay, mainly in mostly they were found in mainland South Asia. Okay, since Neolithic period up until the Iron Age. Yeah, based on my excavation of the Iron Age site in Lopburi, I also found a number of this kind of ornament. Okay, but they were made from made of local stone, but some were made from shells and some were made from glass as well, and also clay. So clay. So there are some clay T-section based as well. So it looks like this form of ornament or body ornaments has a deep root since Neolithic. Okay, and if the Neolithic people in southern China were Austronesian speaking people or also Asiatic speaking people, yeah. So they left some evidence, okay, in South Asia, in southern Thailand, very long time ago, like this site, and also the pottery style. These are some pottery vessels found at the site, okay, that are pretty unique, like this form. Like basket shape, quite distinctive shape that I haven't found at any site in any Neolithic site in northern central Thailand. They tend to concentrate in southern Thailand, but the round shape, round bottom vessel like this have been found all over South Asia, mainland and island. So maybe some continuity and change in terms of pottery production, okay, but pottery use and production, as kind of the cultural heritage of the farmers. Okay. Yeah, Matthew Speak mentioned about the production and use of fish hooks. Okay, even though in the island South Asia, fish hooks that might be related to Austronesian speaking people were made of shells. But in mainland South Asia, like in southern Thailand and also west central Thailand, like the site of Ban Kao in Kanchanaburi province, they found fish hooks that were made of animal bones rather than marine shells. Okay, and this is newly sighted in Ang Thong province, central Thailand. Okay, during the Bronze, we found the fishing tools made of animal horns as well. Okay. So, and again, we saw the new way of life, the they rely on fishing. Hunting still the big, technique of surviving, not just farming. I think farming was not very important, as like in southern Thailand, they are not many places with the lowland or flat land that you can use, that you can practice wet cultivation or more space to farm. It looks like people might have practiced slash and burn or some forms of horticulture, but they still rely heavily on hunting, fishing, collecting wild plants, and so on. Okay, even though they stay more permanently in one place. Okay, and the use of the stone axe, the Polish stone axe like this, okay, has been found at all Neolithic sites as a trademark or diagnostic artifacts. Okay, so like this site in island South Asia is very interesting because it has the multiple periods of occupations since Neolithic up into the Middle Age, okay, or even the period before the Neolithic. Okay, the pre-Neolithic, see this, the burial is in the flex position, okay, but during the later period, like Neolithic and Bronze Age, they extended supine, a common form of mortuary practice, or farmers, early farmers. Yeah, like there are several Neolithic sites that have been found in island South Asia and also mainland South Asia, okay, that share similar mortuary tradition. Okay, the interment of the dead in the supine, extended supine position, and also jar burials, okay, or other forms of burial, coffin burial. Right, this one in Saraburi province, central Thailand, just about 200 kilometers north of Bangkok. The excavation had found at least 2 clay coffins. Okay, clay coffins. Inside the coffins, they found human remains with pottery, Polish stone axe, and shell beads. Okay, so seashell, marine shells, beads made of marine shells. Okay. So in central Thailand. Yeah, jar burial. This is very interesting site. Ban Non Wat in the Korat Plateau. It's just the adjacent area next to central Thailand in the Korat Plateau, Nakhon Ratchasima province, or in the northeast of Thailand. So Ban Non Wat that have been excavated by Charles Ham and colleagues. Okay, at the lowest level at the site, they found a number of jar burials. Okay, this is maybe the oldest jar burials in Thailand that have been found thus far. Okay, around 4,000 years ago. Okay, so and also one of the barrels contain a rice remain, rice remain that is again supporting the hypothesis set up by Charles Ham that rice farmers, they migrated from southern China into South Asia around 4,000 years ago. Okay, bringing with them the rice cultivation and so on. And also in central Thailand, where I have been working, we found millet, remains of millet, okay, during the Neolithic, and more rice during the Bronze Age. Okay, that's I can show the photo later on. Okay, so sites like Ban Kao and Nong Ratchawat in West Central Thailand, they're dating to the Neolithic period. They have a unique or distinctive tradition of pottery, like the tripod. Actually, tripods have been found along the western mountain range from Uthai Thani province, northwest Thailand, along the western Thailand to southern Thailand, like Surat Thani province on the east coast of the peninsula. Okay, not very far from Khao Sam Kea, but it's Neolithic period, down to the Malay Peninsula as well, the tripod. Okay, again, some scholars have assigned this tradition, linked to the tripod in China during the Neolithic period as well. Okay. But again, the tripod that were used and made in China are quite different from those found in Thailand and Malaysia. I mean, the style, the shape, and the shape of the of the lake. Okay, and some other form like this one. This pot, when it was found, it was broken, and the fragments of this pot were paved on the floor of the barrel, and then they put the dead body on top. Okay, the fragment of we call the church sheet, serving as the sheet of the barrel floor. Okay, so after excavation, archaeologists have reconstruct all the pot church, okay, into they reassembled all the church, and they got this one single pot like this one. So it's very time consuming when they rejoin the fragment of the pottery. So it's very interesting. They call the four braid pottery, mominum, or in Thai. So it might represent, I don't know, a female figure, or I don't know, in terms of gender. So this is the four braid, and it was associated with a female burial as well. The pot with braids like this have been found in Vietnam as well during the Bronze Age. Okay. So I don't know if there's any link between the tradition of making, like, not zoomorphic, not anthropomorphic form, but it looks like, they have a unique shape and form, during the Neolithic. Okay. Pottery are not very standardization and are not very standardized in terms of form. Okay. They vary, and they tend to be very they have like unusual form. Okay. Yeah, during the later period, during the Metal Age, or Bronze Age and Iron Age, okay, in southern Thailand and also in West Central Thailand, we also saw both continuity and change, or new ideas or new tradition. The tradition that was continued from the earlier period is the supai, the extended supai burial, okay, with a variety of grave goods, pottery, stone axe. Okay, but the new items that have been found during this time are bronze axe, like this one, bronze axe. Okay, and more of the spinner wheels or spinning, kind of object to make thread for textile production. Okay, so but they are, they are positioned as, extended supai position. Okay, and the introduction of the bronze technology. Okay, this site is located in Kanchanaburi province. It's very new site. It is newly discovered site. Okay, with a lot of barrels. Okay, that are quite different from those found in the Northeast or in East Central Thailand in terms of grave goods. Okay, but they share similar tradition in terms of the body orientation. Okay, the supai extended position of human or of the individuals with grave goods, including pottery. Rock arts. Well, rock arts in Thailand has, as I mentioned, was site with early rock arts in Thailand have been found in northern Thailand, Lampang province, several thousand years ago. But in southern Thailand and other parts of Thailand, rock arts tend to date what relative dates, tend to suggest that they were pretty late phenomena, maybe during this time period, during the Iron Age, like engravings. They may have used metal tools to engrave on the rock surface to make the arts. Okay, but paintings, was also found. Were also found in southern Thailand. There are so many rock art sites in southern Thailand, starting from Yala, near the border between southern Thailand and Malaysia. Yala, Satun, Krabi, Phang, Prachuap Khiri Khan, down up north to Uthai Thani. okay, with the similar tradition of the maybe painting technique. They use red pen, maybe red ochre to paint the figure. Okay, and most of the figures are natural, naturalistic kind of figure, and also animals like fish or elephants or both marine and terrestrial animals. Okay, so I don't know if they are related to the Austronesian or sea nomad or sea gypsy or not, but if you look at the evidence about the tradition of rock art production, it has very long history, since the Paleolithic period, okay, up until maybe very recently, maybe the historic time, okay, in the peninsula. Okay. So I can skip this. As Geoffrey mentioned about the during the time period between 2,500 to around 2,000 years ago, that we saw the interaction sphere or the marine, the Silk Road, the maritime Silk Road, the Bay of Bengal. Archaeological evidence support that they were intensive and also long distance trade between South Asia and South Asia, and also from island South Asia as well. These are some of the evidence, the plants that we think that might be import and also local. Okay, like Indian jujube, putsa, Indian jujube, or some kind of citrus. These local plants that have been remains of this kind of plants were found in South Asia as well, as believed that they were brought from South Asia into India or South Asia, okay, and southern part of China as well. Okay, but what they were brought in is rice, okay, rice. At Ban Nonwa and Khao Sam Keo in Chumpon, and at my site, Ban Pomajinta in Lobri province, we found a number of rice remain, and the Japonica kind of rice, which first cultivated in China, okay, and it was and they were practiced, they were cultivated since Neolithic up until later historic period, like during the Ayutthaya period. Okay, so again, this kind of import that might suggest the migration and also the movement of people into South Asia. Okay. Let's skip this. And there are some cereals that were imported into South Asia from India. I would need to mention sesame and also cotton. Okay. So we have found remains of cotton and sesame at site at Khao Sam Keo, as well at my site in Lopburi as well, and also site in northeastern Thailand or the Korat Plateau. Well, I have to say that archaeobotanical studies still has been little done in South Asia. So if we do more, if we collect more remains, we have found more. I think we can find more remains of this kind of plants at site dating from 2,500 years ago to around 1,500 years ago. The importation of plants that are key plants that play very important roles in South Asia, like cotton. Okay, cotton from India. Well, during this time, based on my excavation of a site, I found a large number of spinning wheels that they are non-direct evidence of textile production. Okay, well, I have been trying to see what kind of fabric that people use to make textile. Okay, so I would assume that based on the archaeobotanical remains, I would say the cotton was used as the main fabric. Okay. If not some kind of hemp, okay, and more cotton remains have been found at site dating to Demerite, either in southern Thailand, like the Khao Sam Keo in Chumpon province, or central Thailand, like my site in Lopburi province, okay, and some other kind of plants like beans, okay, or sesame. They are not local plants of South Asia. Mung bean as well. mung bean from South Asia. See, again, I would say there are exchange and trade of or importation or transportation of exotic items, not just artifacts, but also plants and animals. I should mention animal later on, but I think in terms of zooarchaeological evidence, we need to do more study about the pig domestication or other kind of animals that were imported into this area. Well, people practice the agriculture based on the number of iron tools, like spade, horse, knife, sickle, and other kind of agricultural tools. Again, so people during this time, the farming was probably the main or the key subsistence strategy. Okay, they rely heavily on domesticated plants, not just rice, but also millet and also other plants as well. Yeah, glass beads. I found thousands of glass beads from my site in Lopburi, and similar beads have been found in southern Thailand, in west central Thailand. Okay, and the we call LAICP study or the geo or compositional analysis of the beads, particularly glass beads, like by Laure Ducibier from the Field Museum in Chicago, and together with the bead excavated by Berenice, also suggests that there are three main groups of glass beads have been found in Southeast Asia. Some were made in, they have their origins in India. Some have origins in China. Okay, some have been manufactured locally, like the site of Khao Sam Keo. Okay, they have good evidence of glass bead production that were distributed from southern Thailand to central Thailand. Okay, maybe to island Southeast Asia as well. So beads, glass bead, or stone beads. Yeah, I found a number of agate and carnelian beads, and also nephrite from my site in Lopburi that suggests that, again, based on the geochemical composition study, suggests that the beads were made, they have their raw material, the source in India. Okay, and I'm now studying on the drilling technique, the technique of making perforation on the beads. Okay, to see if the how they drill the bead. The drilling technique might indicate the origins of the bead as well, and also the tradition that might solve some problem about how stone beads, were introduced and were made, if they were made locally, if they were made non-locally. Okay. But based on the raw material study, it suggests that the raw material were import somewhere else beyond Southeast Asia, okay. Either India for agate and carnelian. For nephrite or stone bead or stone, green stone, there might be the raw material might be import from island Southeast Asia, Philippines or Taiwan. Okay, colleague Xiao Xin Hung, who worked at ANA, she studied the jade or greenstone beads in Taiwan and Southeast Asia. She found that some of the beads or ornaments, like the Ling Ling O that Geoffrey mentioned, they were first made in Taiwan, and then later they were found in the Philippines, northern Philippines, and Vietnam, and also in southern Thailand and also central Thailand. So if all Stone Nation speaking people were the people who made that kind of ornament, okay, they might have a spread or migrate from the island into southern Thailand as well, which just to show some of the stone beads found at my site. Okay, that I am studying the drilling technique to see if they were perforated using the techniques first invented in the Harappa area or in the Indus civilization area in South Asia or not. Yeah, I think you guys have seen this photo from the book by Berenice. So a typical ear ornaments, like double head earrings that were first that have been found in Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, and this were found also in southern Thailand, and also up further north along west central Thailand as well, and also this similar this form of earring. Okay, so they originate maybe maybe I don't know islanders tradition, not mainland maybe, but they have been found in Thailand. Okay, like this one. This is from Utong. This one. Okay. My colleague from Taiwan, when she saw this photo, this is Taiwan jade. This is Taiwan nephrite. Okay, but it was found from the ancient site of Utong in Suphanburi province. Okay, it's not on display, but it's kept now in the storage. But this one, see, is now on display at the National Museum in Lopburi. Okay, so the very similar to those found in Taiwan as well, and also this one on display at the National Museum in Utong province, West Central Thailand. This form a site near Khao Sam Keo in Supang province, in the same province with Khao Sam Keo. Okay, they're made of stone. Okay, so some are made of stone, some are made of like glass as well. Okay, so this might suggest, you know, the ancient maritime trade network routes, you know, linking people from different parts, from South Asia, from Eastern Asia, like China, okay, and from island South Asia into southern Thailand, into this area that Geoffrey mentioned about the Morgan or the Sea Gypsy, this part. Okay, okay. Sites dating to this time period during the Arunotai or during the Meteorite have been found on both sides of the peninsula. See, on this part, on this coast, and also this coast. Okay, in Ranong, in Krabi, okay, in Prachuap Khiri Khan right here, okay, and up into Phetchaburi, and also Suphanburi up here, okay, and also Khao Sam Keo, Chumphon on this side. Similar like beads. I believe that the beads, the glass beads that were made here, were distributed to central Thailand, to my site in this area as well. So it looks like the northern limit of the distribution of the ear ornaments or other kind of diagnostic artifacts of the Austronesian speaking people were like in this area only, okay, in west central and east central Thailand. Okay, we haven't so far we have not found any earring like that in Laos, in Cambodia, except the coast of Vietnam. Okay, so like inner mainland South Asia, there are no tangible evidence of the Austronesian speaking people. Maybe Austroasiatic, I don't know. Okay, so this kind of well, one other thing that is also very important that might stimulate the trade network or the you know, the formation of the trade groups is the making of copper ingots. Okay, copper ingots to make bronze. Okay, maybe, you know, Jack mentioned about tin mining, but we don't have any good evidence about prehistoric tin mining either in Myanmar or in Thailand. But also even though we have the geological deposit of tins along the western mountain range in Thailand and also in Myanmar, but again, to make bronze you need tin. Okay, but the basic metal to make bronze is copper. Okay, in Lopburi province we found so many sites of copper smelting site. Like my site, you know, we found not just the actual copper ingots, but also the byproduct like slag, you know, copper slag. I found them when I excavated this site, thick layers of slag, you know, over 1 meter. Okay, so it's saw the, you know, industrial scale production of copper ingot to be traded with other community that they need to make bronze objects, like bronze ornaments. These are copper ingots that were made from my site during the Arunotai around 2,000 years ago. Okay, the kind of flat kind of things. and this form of copper ingot was also found. They were made from central Thailand. That were found at other sites in beyond central Thailand, like in the Korat Plateau. Okay. Only Price, mentioned about the metal trade network in South Asia basing on his isotopes study of bronze objects in South Asia. That he has a result that I think is very interesting. So far, the biggest copper production site during the prehistoric times are located in central Thailand, in this area. Okay, what we call the Kawapujan area. Okay, there are small scale copper ingot production in Nong Khai province in northeastern Thailand, this area. Okay, but recently one of the bigger center of copper production have been found in Laos, in Sepon 17, in Sepon, like number 17. Yeah. Okay. So late isotope studies suggest that people from this time across Southeast Asia, mainland and island, they import copper ingot from either from central Thailand and from Laos. Okay, like site number 8, Khao Sam Keo, and south another new site in south of Khao Sam Keo. I forgot the name. Also in Supang province, they found that the bronze object that were found in southern Thailand were made using copper from Laos and central Thailand, from Sepon and from the Kawapujan area as well. So again, copper production was an important activity, or things that link the metal trade network with people in South Asia. Yeah. Again, I don't know if, what kind of people, group of people who made copper. I really want to know if they are also Asiatic or also Asian or other people who speak dialects. Okay. I am not sure if they were Mon or Mon speaking people. That's quite early. Okay. Yeah, there are some other artifacts that maybe local in tradition, like the use of ivory to make bracelet, the use of animal canine to make pendants, or the use of seashell. Okay. Yeah, plants remains. Again, just to show some of the photo of the plants remain from my site, to suggest that there were trade in plants. Okay, plants are important trade items as well, not just ornament, not just artifacts. Okay, plants. Now I'm very interested in if they were import animals. Okay, it looks like pigs, maybe the key import animals. During this time period. Okay, so but I need to do more isotope and strontium isotope study to see if there were any non-local animals or not, based on zooarchaeological remains from the site. Okay, yeah, seashell, marine shells are very important raw materials for making ornaments in central Thailand. Again, they are marine animals, I mean the seashells. So there must be an import from communities located near the coast. So at site like Ilaburi, hundreds of sites with remains of seashells, in that some of them are in the process of ornament production, not in complete form. Okay, like this shell disc. Okay. That were in the process of making bracelet. Okay. I have found so many of them at my site.
Thanik, I'm sorry. I'm sorry
We're running
to
off time.
interrupt, but it would be good if you could conclude soon. Yeah, because
Okay,
still,
I'm almost
Dr.
done. I'm almost done.
Supang
Yeah.
and, Professor Supang and Narumon also.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm almost done. Just to say that, just to show that there are local portion of marines or shell ornaments that might link to the people in the coastal areas. Okay, like this one, seashell of different variety of species. Okay, that they were made to make ornaments, like earrings, bracelet, and so on, beads and so on. Yeah, this is the end. You know, just to show the evidence, the archaeological evidence of I don't know of migration movement of people or network. Okay, thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive presentation. I'm not sure I got everything, but it seems you mentioned that about the Austronesian pack, including some jars. And then you mentioned some jars that has been found in the peninsula, in the Malay Peninsula, somehow around 5,000 years ago. Am I right?
Yeah, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. Yeah, the like
Okay.
the barrels. Yeah.
Okay. Could this be linked to the, or maybe it's a stupid question, but could it be linked to the linguistic evidence that Austronesian and Proto-Moclenic languages were already in the peninsula?
That is a very good question, Max. Since I cite Matthew Sprigg that the Austronesian speaking people cultural package, you know, if there were farmers with jar barrels, with pottery use, and also some, you know, kind of artifact like axe, stone axe or shell axe. Okay, that if those items are cultural package of Austronesian speaking people, we would say that, you know, those people were, you know, Austronesians. What do you think, Geoffrey? Oh, we can't hear you.
Geoffrey, yeah. I saw you talking, but your mic is muted.
Yeah. Some things like jar burials are very often associated with Austronesian movements through the islands. The rest, I think, could be very difficult to make any such claim, especially so far inland. Some of these sites, I think that's, although we know there are jars inland, of course, in Laos and so on, but I guess it's not uniquely Austronesian.
Okay.
I think that's the answer. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know if there are other questions to Dr. Thanik.
I did have a couple very brief comments or questions. The flexed burials kind of interest me. How newly dead does a body have to be for you to flex the legs? I mean, if rigor mortis, body stiffness, sets in quite rapidly, does that mean the people who were doing flexed burials for some reason wanted to carry out the burial very quickly? And would that maybe, since you mentioned an association with hunter-gathering, maybe that was because they were nomadic and couldn't be carrying a corpse around, obviously. Yeah, and they also needed to dig the smallest graves they could manage, so they'd flex the body while it was still able to be flexed. Is that possible?
That's good point. Yeah, maybe in terms of the space limitation, and also, you know, they were nomads, or they were, you know, highly mobile people. And another thing that I see from the flex burial is that there are no grave goods at all, just the dead body. Yeah. So maybe just, you know, one thing that we need to look at, you know, why, you know, but what's behind the idea about flex, you know, why people were, you know, in crouching position. There's I really want to know why they, you know.
Maybe it saves effort. You don't have to dig such a big grave.
Okay. Yeah. You're right that most of the flex burials are not deep. They are quite shallow. Yeah.
I've got one more question, if I may. There's a difference of opinion between different kinds of writers on negritos throughout Southeast Asia. I'm one of the ones who think the Negrito phenotype evolved very recently and separately in different places, and I've written on that. And I think the geneticists are coming around to that view. The human remains specialists also have not found early remains in Southeast Asia that correspond to the Negrito phenotype. But many ethnologists still keep talking about a very widespread Negrito presence. In fact, Mahdi, in fact, says all these things that I was talking about today were carried by Negritos. I didn't mention that because I don't agree with him on that. But your Sakai cave is in the Aslian area, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And there was a human remain there. Is there any evidence at all that you could associate that remain with the Negrito phenotype or not?
So far, I don't have a good lines of evidence that link between the Sakai cave or Mokyo cave with the current, Negrito. But my former teacher who dug the site, he strongly believed that those people, related to the Sakai, even though there's no strong evidence to support his claim, Yeah.
Well, David Bulbeck is the one who's been looking at that most closely, I think. But anyway, I just leave that as another open question. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Geoffrey. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We will still be talking about migration. We'll do a big jump from Neolithic to the contemporary period with a presentation from Professor Supang and Narumon.
Okay, Ajahn Supang, would you like to start?
We move many thousand years back to present, and in this paper we are going to talk about current issues, about the future of the sea people, and in this paper Ajahn Narumon will give the first part of the presentation. So may I have Ajahn Narumon, please?
Okay, thank you. I think the title for this time, the last of the series, is also Uncertain Futures. We're talking about these people back then, several thousand years ago, and then right now. So I think I mentioned this, but just to set the scene for this presentation, the sea nomads in Thailand have been divided into 3 groups: Mokan, Moklan, and Uraklawoit, and they have the distribution along the western coast of Thailand, like here. There are about 43 villages in southern part of Thailand. So in our paper, in our presentation, we are talking about identity and social space because I think the term social space also derives from Condominas, in that he saw that the term culture might not be broad or deep enough to capture whatever the way of life of these people. So the term social space is also introduced. And maybe we need to think about culture as, seascape, shorescape, forestscape, because although these people have been known to be really good with the sea, diving, swimming, they are also good with the forest as well. So they use the forest, and they have the folklore and beliefs about the forest as well as the sea. The sense of community is also interesting for these people. If they are mobile, if they are nomadic, if they form a larger group during the rainy season and smaller groups, or even individual or 1 or 2 kabang during the dry season, then what's the community for them? I think this should be linked to the non-geographical space, so mythical space that is also lies within this concept of social space. So the term nomadic is also very significant when we describe these people, and the process of this sedentarization also affect them really greatly. We heard in earlier series that we talk about mother island and satellite islands. So the Morgan, they have been tied and they recognize one another as community if they come from the same mother island. That is the birthplace and the base, the place where they grow up, and then they go off to satellite islands and even settle on different islands. So the mother island and the rituals, especially the Lobong, the ancestor spirit pole, is very important for the Morgan. For the Moglan, they form a larger community, and among the three groups, the Moglan have been most sedentary into village in coastal area, like Chuck mentioned, more familiar with the mangrove ecology than island ecology. So they are tied together with the pota, or the spirits of the ancestors, and the rituals are really the significant part of the community, like Chuck mentioned. The Uraklavoi form a larger village, but they also travel and then have temporary encampment in different parts of Andaman Sea for their livelihood. And they have their village, which is the largest of all the three groups. And also the rituals. We also have the photo of the ritual of the Uraklavoi boat floating ceremony that have been organized twice a year, whereas the Lobong celebration is only once a year. So there's also the identity with isolation, interaction, and relations. And actually, my doctoral dissertation, I went to the Surin Island to find, in the hope to find a group in isolation. And in the opposite, I found a lot of interaction, a lot of relations among different groups of the Morgan and the outsiders. So these relations are really complex. So the social space is not within the community alone, but with the people that also visit, or they visit the other islands and coastal areas as well. And this is not only the relation with the Tauke or the middleman only. I think in the other parts of the series, we also talk about sedentarization in Thailand and Myanmar. This experience is similar, but in Myanmar, I think there's also the attempt to probably integrate the Morgan into Buddhism, and also encourage the children to go to formal school. So there's a change of identity also and social space of the Morgan people, and also with the Uraklavoi and Moglan. Like we mentioned that the Moglan have been quite integrated, and they took a lot of rituals and ceremonies similar to the Thai, and even folklores. You know, there are similar folklores with the Thai group, like Nang Sik Song. You know, the 12 sisters are really similar to Thai folklore. When we talk about Sea people and the situation, the rights, the basic rights, we have to talk about the Morgan, who is the group that is struggling with the nationality. About half of the population now is stateless. So we talked earlier about archaeology and linguistics that took us back over thousands of years. So the identity and social space that we are analyzing now is seen from the lens of nationality and citizenship, which is really, really recent establishment. The three groups have been a part of Andaman Sea and coastal areas for a long time. And we have documentation during British colonial period that the Uraklavoi have been around in Lanta Island. And then there's also the legend about Tokiri, the Indonesian navigator who joined the sea nomads or Uraklavoi in Lanta Island. So I think this part is important if we look at Thongchai's Siam map, the idea of Siam being demarcated especially during the colonial period. Still, the border demarcation is not completed yet because there are a few places, especially island like in Ranong province, where there's still unclear demarcation between Thai and Myanmar. So when we talk about sea people and legal status as citizens, we need to recognize these people as being nomadic, traveling all over the Andaman Sea. But once the border has been drawn, then that's problematic. These people became trans-border population. The mobility, migration is very important issue. So for the Iraq Lavoy, we have the documentation that during King Rama V, with the issue between Siam then and British Malaya, there's an attempt to resettle a few Iraq Lavoy from Lanpa Island, which is in Krabi province now, to join the group of the Iraq Lavoy in 3 southern islands in Satun province. So now the people in Koh Lipe and other islands in southern part of Thailand face the situation with land disputes. Many of them are still landless. So I think their statement that we are the first settlers and not encroachers are really true according to history. And for the Morgan, Thai-Myanmar transboundary and mobility is still there, especially with the change of season. It has been there during pre-tsunami time. And then at that time, less than 10 Morgan received Thai citizenships. Afterwards, after the tsunami, when they became known and the Thai government paid some attention to their stateless status, then the work has been gradually done until like half of the population, about 500 Morgan, now receive Thai citizenship. And now it's Ajahn Supang's part to talk about the Legal Status and Nationality Act.
Thank you. Now we talk about the policy about bringing the sea people into a group of Thai citizens. We agree, Ajahn Narumon and I, that we use the term Chaole, which is a cover term to include all the 3 subgroups. And in English, we use the sea people. Thailand and Nationality Act is quite complicated. We started the first Nationality Act in 1952, and that was because of the influx of the Chinese immigrants who escaped from the political conflicts in mainland China after 1949. And with that, even the year after, we were still busy how to manage those people who decide to stay and settle in Thailand and not go back to China. Then later on, the the Nationality Act moved to 1965, which is the first time that the state recognized that people who are born in Thailand and those who are born from Thai parents can become Thai nationals. In the past, only those who are Thai national, Thai by blood. I mean, the principle of Chiu Sanguinis and Chiu Solis are jointly put in the same Nationality Act of 1965, which is a bit unusual because in most countries, they either choose only those people who have the same blood to be the dominant group and to be the citizen, or some other groups may choose those who are born on their land, like the United States, that all of those people who are born on the land can become their nationals. But for Thailand, we include both in 1965. Then later on, the latest one, 2020, the one on 2012, 2000, before that, 1992, the government started to be aware of the stateless indigenous people. And this time the law focused on the application of those stateless indigenous people. I use the term because this is very, very important that actually the Hill tribe people or the Shaolei or Sea people, they are stateless not because they are immigrants from somewhere. They were there maybe even before the Thai state started, but they were not counted or registered in the central registration form. So they became stateless. And in 2012, they were included. It is important to indicate that Thailand in the year 2003 ratified the UN Convention on the eradication of racial discrimination, or what we call CERD, CERD. And from that year, the government tried to include all those various ethnic groups who were excluded from the registration. So I call this spontaneous exclusive policy, that the government didn't want to exclude them, but just forget to count them among other people. Okay, so the next one, Ajahn Puk. Back to you. Okay, I continue. Going into how the Sea people and other uncounted people can be included as nationals. We look at the Constitution of 2017, which state that the state should promote and provide protection for different Chao Thai ethnic groups to have the right to live in the society according to the traditional culture, custom, and ways of life and liturgies, and insofar as it is not contradictory to public order or good morals, and does not endanger state security or health. So in principle, those people must be and should be included as Thai citizens, but for some technical reasons that not all of them are entitled to. Now back to Ajahn Puk.
Okay, so when we talk about ethnic narratives of origin and the social space, some of the examples here point to the answer of the question who we are or who are we. For example, Morgan in Rawai Beach, and this is probably the place where Chak mentioned that the Morgan wouldn't like to travel or be nomadic anymore, and he or she destroyed the Kabang, right? So it's the place, the southernmost settlement of the Morgan, who have the same settlement as the Iraklawoi. So the Iraklawoi were there before, and the Morgan joined them. The Morgan in Rawai Beach have almost lost their cultural identity, but a few years back, they organized the Lobong tradition again, so representing their ancestors, and have the ceremony in the full moon days of 5th lunar month. So losing identity and gaining back or revitalize their cultural identity is also common among the three nomads group. The Iraklawoi in Lipe Island in Satun province also have the narratives of their ancestors and identity. Like I mentioned in the previous slide, that King Rama the 5th time, there's also a resettlement of the Iraklawoi from Lanta Island in Krabi province to Adang Island in Satun province as the border demarcation, that this is Siam and this is not part of British Malaya. But if we look at the narrative of the Iraklawoi themselves, they don't talk about border demarcation. They talk about the legend of Tokiri, the Indonesian navigator who probably came from Aceh, according to the legend, that brought a few Iraklawoi family from Lanta to Lipe and Adang. So this is really personal, and it's the narrative that has been passed on. And if you go to Lipe Island, His tomb is still there, and it's a sacred site. So before the boat floating ceremony, then there's a small ceremony at his grave and his tomb. And also Urak Lawai in Rawai Beach in Phuket province, where there was a violence during land dispute. The people and the community have a shrine called Balai, which is also interesting in that it's a term in Malay, right? And the Urak Lawai in the other places in Thailand don't call the shrine Balai, only this place. Now the shrine site, the land where the shrine sits on, has been claimed by private owner. So now there's also the interesting practice of movement, how the shaman and the community move the shrine from original place to the other place. And also this place, like I mentioned, the land dispute erupt into violence, and the conflict still prolong until these days. So this is the shrine in Lipe Island of the Tokiri, who sail from Lanta to make a settlement on Lipe and Adang Island. And also on the right is Balai Shrine in Rawai area. The left photo shows the headline of the Prawit, the deputy prime minister at the time, stepped into Sea Gypsy land dispute. So probably Rawai and Lipe are the places where land dispute is most serious among the other places. And then the top right photo shows Ajahn Supang when she came for reunion day at Rawai Beach. And then this is the present shaman. And you can observe that the ritual is partly Thai, Bai Si. And actually the term Bai Si is interesting in itself because Bai is rice, supposedly in Khmer language. I'm not sure, Geoffrey might clarify this, Bai. Or actually there's a term in Morgan language, Bai, which is the husked rice, right? So Bai Si, Sri is something very auspicious. Or there's another meaning of Sri related to sire, or the pepper leaf. So this is the ceremony that adopt Thai ceremony and then integrate it within their own ceremony. And also the small string that ties to Ajahn Supang's wrist also is also Thai ceremony, when you would like to invite or welcome some people, then this ceremony is organized. So there's a mixture, integration among different features of ceremony. So the case of Rawai, like I mentioned, the land paper, constructing a resort, it's still ongoing. But maybe the resort owner should be glad because of the COVID, with the halt of his project. I think he or she or they are saving a lot of money with that. So with the dispute and with similar problems among the Chawle community in Thailand, and also with indigenous communities in northern part of Thailand, they are now join into a network of indigenous people. So maybe we can call this a new social space, social space of people with similar problems. Right now, some of them are sitting in front of the parliament because they have a problem with land, and the government can't seem to solve that problem. So back to Ajahn Supang.
In this slide, I try to translate a verse written by the lady in the middle. Her name is Nuna, and I asked for her permission because in this verse, what she wrote is very impressive for me in terms of identity. How fortunate we are to have a home to return to have our loved ones, to have a job to do, and finally, we are thankful and love you, Thailand. This is what Narumon said, that it is a kind of personal blended identity, because in terms of beliefs, some of them are still animist, Some of them are now Muslim, and some of them are now Buddhist. And in terms of ethnic identity, they may be split into subgroups, but they call themselves Chaole, the term that the Thai state give to them with no resistance, not like the Chao Khao, as we said last time. I can recall when Cynthia Chu mentioned that those people try to have a kind of a flexible identity in order to escape from state control. For example, sometimes they want to be Muslim, but sometimes they do not want to be Muslim, or they want to be from such and such island or not from such island. And also, Vivian, we also mentioned about the identity of these people. But it is not the similar case for Thailand, because most Sea people are more or less integrated into the Thai society, not assimilated. And this is a process that is not forcing, but they are more look forward to being integrated. In terms of the other social space, looking at the language, the ritual, costume, food, and livelihood, you can see that they are Muslim ladies from Malaysia. The way she has the lace blouse and the batik sarong. This is typical Malay, and they are going to perform the rongeng dance. I don't know, in Thai we call rongeng. I don't know the term in Malay word, whether it is the similar. And the livelihood, this is the ceremony that they are going to decorate this boat and then float it into the sea and leave it like that. For the term language, we are a group of Thai researchers who are interested in the Morgan, in the Chaole, and also in the southern part of Myanmar and Thailand. So we conducted a study of the Miek or Mergui and Prachuap in Thailand. And on that road, we crossed the Tenasserim range, which is known to most people. And when we asked Burmese people, they do not call this mountain Tenasserim. They have another name. So we wonder the term Tanausi, as people come from what origin, and we are in the process of trying to interpret that the Chaole may be the indigenous people who reached this land some 1,000 years ago, as Geoffrey and Ajahn Thanik presented to us. And they know the land, they know that this is the land where they can find plenty of betel nut and betel leaf. And that's how Tanok, which means the land, and Sri or Sire, which means the betel leaf. So this is the land of the betel leaf. That's our hypothesis to understand the term Tanausi. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. I think the other parts of the series also talk about how the borders were blurred, both the physical borders, the mobility borders, and also cultural borders. And I think Chak already mentioned about the different forms of Lobong, the spirit pose that has been transformed according to the Morgan interpretation. So with the narratives of origin and the social space, it's still very flux and also dynamic.
Now back again. Now for the policy and the procedures, this is complicated. Although they were not intentionally to be excluded from Thai nationality, but the process is not easy. First, there are two legislations that all stateless people need to be interested in. The first one is a Nationality Act that I mentioned. The second one is the Central Civil Registration Act. A person can be considered a Thai national only when his or her name is registered in this Central Civil Registration Act, which is overseen by the Ministry of Interior. So the government policy is that those people who were not counted, not surveyed and not registered, although they were living, born and living in Thailand, they need to be registered. And this is stated in the Nationality Act. In the next slide, we try to find the statistics and who are people who are left behind for the three groups. As Ajahn Narumon said, that most of them are now Thai nationals. Only some of the Morgan that are half of them, about 500 people. And we will look into this group to see what are the challenges. And this is the left behind. In this photo, you can see that a girl proudly show her identity card once she obtained Thai national. In the next slide, I talk about the procedures, how to apply. This is common to all people, but the procedure can be more difficult for some group like the Morgan to be recognized as a legal person according to the Central Civil Registration Act. First, the person needs to submit a request to the Ministry of Interior under the Department of Provincial Administration or the DOPA. But this application can be done through the local government, which is at the provincial level. So those Chale who are living in Phuket or Satun or Phang Nga or Krabi, they can do that to the province where they are living. And what they need to show is the attached to the application is the evidence, especially their birth certificate. Then after that application, they need to wait to be interviewed at the district level. Now this will be done at the local district is lower than provincial level. Interview is to confirm that applicants were born in Thailand or born from Thai parents. So here you can see the two principles of socialist and no, the principle of by blood and by birth. And after that, if the applicants live in remote areas or are elderly persons who cannot travel, a mobile team from the DOPA will conduct interview in their village. This has been done for the Hill Tribe group, but for the Chale group, it will be different and more difficult. In the mobile team, a representative from the Ministry of Justice can accompany and conduct the DNA test if required. This is for the case when the person said that his or her parents are also Thai, because they are Thai, then they need to test the blood to make sure that they are real biological parents or children. Then in the next slide, the next step is that once the application is approved, the person's name will be registered in the Central Civil Registration of Thai nationals according to the Act. And the person will receive a Thai ID card. In early this year, the Ministry of Interior has developed a new policy to accelerate the approval of nationality requests to solve the problem of stateless person in Thailand. This is because DOPA has developed its DOPA flagship for 2021 that they will try to meet the need of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that all those people should be entitled to have Thai citizen. Then in the next slide, what are the challenges? Here, I show the photo of a very old lady. I'm not sure whether she's still stateless or not. Ajahn Puk said that maybe not, But just to give an example, that the big challenges are the lack of birth certificate. Those old people, they were born with no birth certificate. They were born by a midwife. And from a trip that I went with Ajahn Narumon to Got Lao in Rayong, in Ranong, the headmaster told us that it is very difficult to help the elderly to obtain Thai nationality, because when the team came and interviewed them, where were you born? They said, I was born in the boat. and where is the boat? The answer is, I don't know. And when they ask, so in what direction the boat is coming? the team try to help. If the boat is heading to Thailand, then you can claim that you are born in Thailand. But those people are too naive to to try to answer. So I think that some kinds of tutorial can help them to have faster access to nationality. Apart from the lack of birth certificate, lack of mobile team to go and visit them and make it faster, that's another problem. And finally, we find that most of the stateless people among the ethnic, the Chaole, are the aging population. But even though we have all those challenges, and we still have 5,000, which is actually not a big number, I would say. And I really, yes?
500.
Yeah, 500. Actually, I would like to compare this with Myanmar, and we think that we may ask Maxim or some friends to secure some statistics to share, because once we discussed in the seminar, and we said, and I think Chuck and Maxim said that most of them are now Myanmar citizens given by the army. No problem of citizenship. Okay, we would like to compare how two neighboring countries adopting similar or different policy to the Sea people in terms of nationality, which will lead to protection. Now I would like to talk about the remedies. Despite that, not all of them are Thai national, and some of them remain stateless. We have some legislation ongoing. The first one is a draft legislation on the promotion and preservation of ethnic way of life, initiated in 2019. This is still underway, and it will take some time that the law will be promulgated, and we have to see how far that the promotion and preservation can really protect the Chaole. The second is the guidelines for the revitalization of the Chaole livelihood, launched in the year 2010 during the administration of Apisit administration from Democrat Party. At that time, it seems that Chaole was not too neglected, and the guideline was launched, and it includes both short-term and long-term measures to protect the life of the Chaole. And one of the protection include access to Thai nationality. As I said, that we have academics who also try to work on this. In this photo, we had a meeting with the academics from Miak University in Miak, Pamergui, in Myanmar, and we discussed about possible research collaboration. So I think that it was vice president. The two ladies are the vice president of Miek University, and there are also some other local authorities like the head of the district in Mudong and Banao Si town who came to the meeting. And we plan to continue our academic cooperation. Okay.
So the procedure, Supang already mentioned about procedure and remedies for access to Thai nationality for ethnic Morgan. I'd like to mention that now they've been in the Indigenous Network, and actually we're going to have a meeting this Saturday. They form into the assembly, and they have their own representatives. So along with the Karen, with the Mani and other ethnic groups in Thailand, about I think 40 of them has been involved in this network. And then if you follow the news headline, there's a recent Karen displacement and also statelessness issue just came up in Bangkloi, which is in Phewburi province. These are the Karen that have been around the area for a long time, but with the clash along the border, and also since the conflict of ideology at the about 50 years time, the area has been considered to be sensitive by the Department of National Park. So the Civil Society, Swinton Anthropological Center, who is going to take care of the draft law on protecting and promoting of ethnic groups in Thailand. Chumchon Thai Foundation and our institute also involved in trying to extract some lessons from the sea nomads, from the Chawle, to help with the Karen community as well. And the photo on the right hand side said Safe Bangkloi, which is the area with conflict. And one of the person on the right hand side is Nuna, the Chawle Muslim that Ajahn Supang mentioned. And the left hand side is the representative from civil society. So this is some example of pictures of the network and the activities. The money also joined the network. And then in front of the parliament, stop violation against Karen people in Bangkloi, also involved by a few Chawle. And some Chawle community, especially in Rawai, also prepare dry fish to give the Karen in Bangkloi. They actually drove up to Bangkloi, but then the national park allowed them to stay only for a few hours. So this is a kind of exchange. During my talk, I mentioned about the exchange of rice and fish among the Karen and among the sea people. So this is an example of forming the network and providing a new social space for them to work on one another.
Yes, so we have only four slides left, so, and we can finish. The last part is our interpretation. Those Chawle who become Thai national and some who are not Thai national, it seems that they are in some situation that is not favorable, and that's why I put it drawn into the sea. Actually, the Chawle will never be drawn because they are great swimmer and great diver, but because of the political situation. The first one is about land dispute with the private business. This photo is from Hat Rawai that I took, and you can see that it is a beautiful beach. And the Morgan lived there for more than 60 years. On the right-hand side, you can see the photo that they show that the king visited this community in the year 1959, and that was 60 years ago. So they were there before the business who came and could buy the land and claim that this is their land. So this is a big challenge and dispute that make them drawn into the sea. In the next slide, I show you this photo is not from Thailand but from Myanmar. That in Myanmar they were relocated to another island because the army would like to use their island for pearl farming and also for soft crab farming, like in the bottom. So they were relocated and live in a new hut that built in the same style, and they cannot continue their livelihood. In the next slide, this is again about the land. Some of them live on the shore in many provinces, but then the government announced that those shores become the national park, and they became the enclosure, and they cannot continue their livelihood. Example from Lipe Island, that because they are allowed to stay on the national park land with special permission, but they cannot fish because the national park will not allow anybody to fish, so they were not allowed to fish. So if you can stay there but you cannot fish, what can you do? This is really a big problem. And in the photo on the left, on the right, upper right, it is a poster that the Shaolei said that, please give us the right to the land and the right to fish, to the fish. The next problem is about the continuation of translocality and transborder mobility. In some group, they continue that this translocalism, some relatives living on Myanmar side and some on this side, and they would go back and forth, and that make them in a very complicated situation that the local government, the province, would wonder whether they are the Shaolei who came from Myanmar and come and try to have Thai nationality, or whether they are those who stay here because of their mobility. And the last one is about deprivation of access to protection. The government tried to solve the problem for that. Ajahn Narumon was very active in the case of the Rawai, that finally the government, with the presentation of Ajahn Narumon to the Vice Prime Minister at that time, they decided that they would have a community, they declare a community land that the Morgan can live in on Hat Rawai, but not on the beach, side by side with the land that belong to the business group. And with that, living in community land, they have to change their livelihood, and it is not sustainable. In the next slide, you see how is their new settlement. On the right hand side, you can see that this is how they live in a very small community, and no sewage, no garbage system, and no drainage system, and that's the quality of life they are facing. And on the left, this is about the youth. We met two young ladies who are now graduate from college. So they are 3 people who are now graduates from the college, and they will not go back to the old ways of living. They will look for a job in tourism or other things. So we end here that we wonder whether obtaining a nationality is the best solution or not. In the 21st century, this may not be the only solution that can answer everything. But the state will continue to ask whether you belong to us and whether you are loyal to us. And that may be the old paradigm of thinking about citizenship for migrant people. A study from my colleagues at Chulalongkorn University at the Thai-Myanmar border town of Mae Sot found that people there have some kind of border partial citizenship. People from Myanmar, Karen or Rohingya or Mon or Burman, they have border partial citizenship already because they could access healthcare, they could access land, and they could do many things, including job. So here I think that Saskia Sassen observation that the repositioning of citizenship, that in some cases people are recognized as citizens, like most of the Shaolei, but even though they are recognized, they are not authorized to have land tenure because they live on public land, on national park, and they are not authorized to fish. So this kind of citizenship, what can you serve? What can what can it serve you? Maybe you can have access to healthcare. That's what they look for, especially the old people. But if that deprive them from so many things, they may want to look at the example of those in Malaysia and in Singapore for a better chance of life. And we end our presentation here. Thank you. Oh, last photo. This is to confirm that there was a meeting, between the French scholar and the Thai scholars at Chula.
No comment.
Thank you very much to both of you, Chantavanich and Narumon. First, I may react on the from the Myanmar point of view of the situation. It's quite different in Myanmar in the way citizenship is conceived. The main difference being that you can be recognized as an ethnic group of Myanmar, which I believe is not the case in Thailand. In Thailand, either you're Thai or you're not Thai, but there is no ethnic belonging which is directly linked to citizenship. In Myanmar, on your ID card, you have your ethnic belonging. So from that point of view, the Moken, even though they are wrongly considered as a branch of the South Burmese, they have a place in the official list of ethnic groups in Myanmar. So from that perspective, if they ask for citizenship, they don't have real issues to get it. The issues are that there are very few institutional presence in the islands, that to get such citizenship, they should go to the township or which is quite far. And anyways, the Moken won't go to these government offices because they are too afraid of. And the other thing is, and this is true for the whole country, it's not because you have citizenship that you can protect your land. And it's true for the Karen, for the Kachin, for everybody. So it's the same for healthcare. So they don't really have incentives to go after this citizenship in Myanmar. In fact, when they receive ID cards, Myanmar ID cards, is much more because the government want them to have ID cards, so they can also count them in the elections and so on that they receive. So, but it's generally they don't go after this ID cards in Myanmar. The other thing is trans-border mobility was not necessarily an issue. I mean, Jacques can tell you more about this, but the Moken were able to cross the Thai and the Myanmar border at sea, and the immigration would let them go through. When issues were raised, it was more because of the goods and sometimes illegal goods that Moken Toke would put on their boat, knowing that they can cross very easily the border, that there were some problems. Which is probably one of the reasons also they abandoned the kabang, because with the kabang they were automatically seen as Moken and potential targets for the immigration to be searched and so on. So yes, I mean I agree that citizenship is not necessarily a good solution. Even more in Myanmar, I don't believe it's a solution to the problems they face now. As you said, there's all these pearl farm developments. So also increasing pressure on land. And as you said, because they are seen as sea gypsies, people believe they don't have any claim on land. And this is a big issue right now. Because now in the islands, since there are a lot of Burmese, village land is commodified. It's sold out. Mokens never consider selling or buying land in the islands. But now this is happening increasingly. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I don't know if for the participants have questions to. Yes, Vivian, please.
Yeah, I think the strategy of the nation state needs to be compared, because Indonesia is, since the time of Suharto, was very much of a surveillance state. It must know the movements of every single citizen, every person in the territory, and so the issue of citizenship was a non-issue, because everybody in the territory that Indonesia claimed was automatically a citizen, and every citizen has to get an identity card. And to get an identity card, you have to go to a certain place, and even fishermen selling their fish had to declare their presence to the police when they sell their fish. And I'm not talking about tribal fishermen, I'm talking about ordinary village fishermen. So Indonesia was very much more of a surveillance state. So I think the strategy of the state is something to be considered, because you were saying that Thailand wants loyalty. I mean, in Indonesia, we don't even have to consider loyalty. You're on my territory, you are a citizen. So this is why the orang laut in the Riau Lingga archipelago are not fighting about the issue of citizenship, because they are automatically citizens, but they are fighting about the issue of state control. And state control is very much dictated by attitudes towards nomadism and being civilized. So the orang laut are seen as not civilized, and that's why there's a policy of settling them down. But then the settling down, as you are pointing out, also doesn't mean land rights. So you can be settled down and then you still don't get title deeds to the houses that are built for you. And the reason why in Indonesia you have a policy of surveillance and settling down nomadic populations is that it's not targeted only at the sea people. We have people who are forest dwellers who are also seen in the same light about being settled down. So the settling down and the land rights are two distinctive issues, as you have also shown in your presentation. So I think there's an interesting comparison that can be drawn between Thailand and Indonesia. I'm just wondering, this is a question, I'm just wondering whether there is any fear on the part of the mainstream populations about the black magic of the nomadic communities, because that is one strategy that the tribal communities use, And this is true not just of the sea people, this is true also of forest dwellers. And it keeps them autonomous. It helps to retain their autonomy, having the mainstream population afraid of them.
I asked Ajahn Puk to answer.
Maybe in the old days, there's such belief that these people possess black magic. And even among the population, among the Morgan, I think there's a belief about black magics, and you have to be careful for certain people.
So
But
the
not
I-
anymore.
Not
as much
anymore.
in Indonesia.
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah. I recall quite recently, I mean, it was a few years ago, but Olivier Ferrari, who was saying that Thai were not necessarily afraid of Moklen, but they would go to see Moklen, how do you say, health care. I mean, they were seeking the Moklen Bomo to yeah, and it was quite recently. I mean, I don't know for Indonesia, Vivian, but if you look at Myanmar, there is obviously a fear of Moken spirits and Moken spiritual appropriation of the territory. Hence the spiritual warfare I explained a bit last time. For Burmese trying to either to contain or erase the Moken spirit. But if you take this from the point of view of the resort builder and investor, they don't care much about Moken magic.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more of the positive side. So some of the Mokland shaman or Raklaway shaman became like a fortune teller for a few Thai. So they came just to seek for some suggestions. Yeah. So it's not
Yeah,
magic, it's positive.
Yeah, even lottery numbers. Yes. All right. Are there any other questions? No? Yeah.
Question, no, but you would just say one thing about the social space you mentioned from Condominas. In fact, it's a right tool to what Condominas say, what there is, let's say, the espace social restreint, that means the small social space and the larger social space. What you are speaking about in your presentation, in fact, is the relation between the small social space and the large social space, nation or minorities, if you want. And in order to make these two social spaces going together or go somewhere for the people, indigenous people, you have to link them. Condominas didn't link this is why he divided its small social space, the ethnic and the large social space for the nation, briefly speaking. But social space, in fact, yes, is what you said at Narumon. It could be another social space, which can be, let's say, transnational or indigenous network or whatever can be. My fear is if you take another step in this social space, a larger one than the national one, indigenous, you will forget some who will not be included in this network, because the networks need us to be quite it's militant. You had to you want it, and some Moken will not join, for instance. The social space, so. Is more a conceptual and practical tool to be used on the field work. But we have to be more precise if you want to jump from the smaller population and the larger population, which leads to citizenship and so on. This is one of the reasons we call our map the social space map, because our idea is within these two social spaces, the small one and the larger one, you have to have some way to, let's say, like a ladder, you have to climb from one to another one. And in order to do that, you have to know as much as possible for the land issue, for instance, for the Moken, you have to know all their knowledge of the land. Then they can claim some, possibilities that they know. Now they are using this knowledge in order to say that we were there before and we can prove it. So this social space concept, which is very useful, has to be more practical, and this is what we are trying to do with Maxim. That means every places, every land, every beach, everywhere has to be recognized by the people themselves, that we have to put in the land, and then we draw a kind of a map that will include everything. That means the Lobung, the spirit, and everything. So this would be the link. The social space concept is a very good concept to link the two social spaces. And if needed, go to the third, the social spaces, which will be transnational or indigenous. Yes, that's a good point for the social spaces. There is a lot of things to say, so I won't go.
I think Geoffrey had a comment or a question. I don't know.
Nothing very significant, but you mentioned this dance, the Rongyang. It is a Malay word. It's a single word in Malay, Rongyang, and it's a social dance, but it has a slightly less than respectable history, apparently, because it involves males and females dancing together, at least in the Malay situation. I was interested in this idea that Tanasarim, the word Tanasarim, I don't know what language it in that form it comes from, but the suggestion that it might relate to the Malay phrase Tanah Siri. Is that a folk etymology, or is there some evidence behind it? It's quite far north of the Malay area.
Jacques, what about Tanau Sri? Is this the Thai?
Yeah, Tanausi is a Thai word to call the range.
Yeah.
And
Because the Moken calls Burmese Tanau.
call Burmese?
Yeah,
Tanau.
can call the Burmese Tanau. Yeah.
The person, people.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Cool.
And how do they call the mountain, the range?
Jacques?
Yes, I don't know.
We can check. We can check.
Yeah.
For us, we are not linguists and we are not archaeologists, so we just use some because we have a friend, an anthropologist who works in the south of Thailand, Dr. Chaviwan, and she knows Malay. She can speak Yavi, and she said that Tanok means the land. And I said that Sri, from what I checked with the Urak Lavoy in Rawai, I was there 20 years ago, and she showed me all the island. This island is called Supi Pinang. One is for the leaf, and one is for the nut, and Supi means the basket. So I start to learn that Sire island means the island of the leaf, of the beetle leaf. And after that, Ajahn Narumon said that in the Thai royal term, when we call the container of the betel nut for the high-ranking people. We call it Pan Prasi. Si spell Sri. Pan means the container. Okay, so it means that in the word Sri, which means the betel nut, is known in Thailand and among the Urak Laboy. And from that very basic understanding, we try to link that and try to hypothesize that this is the land of the betel nut.
In Malay, it is a full vowel in the first way. It's sire, not suri, which exists
Yeah.
with other meanings. But
Yeah.
if the first word is tano or tano, meant to mean land, that would be a specifically northeast Malay, Patani or Kelantan pronunciation, not the west pronunciation, which would be tanah. Yeah, I'm just passing that out.
So it will be interesting to explore further, okay, and make some comparison.
All right.
Can I have one?
Yeah,
Back to when last time I left early, and I think that I would like to ask Vivian about the Orang Selat. And you mentioned about the piracy. In Thailand, when we call the pirate, we call them Jon Salat. And I wonder whether it is the pirate Selat.
Yeah. Actually, Salat means straits. It just means like Strait of Singapore, Straits of Malacca. But the Orang Salat are pirates, are known to be pirates. They are documented as pirates. And also, at the time that Singapore was founded, the Malay royals didn't intend to give Singapore to the British. So they just signed a treaty to establish a British trading post. But then the British are very cunning, and then they use this and they use that, and they manage to get Singapore. So the Temenggung, who is an officer of the court, he's the leader of the pirates. So he's the one who organizes them. He's in charge of them. So the British ships were raided, and so the Orang Salat were known to be pirates, and then it's a result of the piracy that the British had a series of negotiations with the Temenggung, and then they said, okay, you go to Johor, and we will not disturb you in Johor. And this is why the Johor ruling family is descended from the Temenggung.
So Selat from this name may be the term that the Thai know. So we call it piracy Selat.
I interviewed an old pirate who was very old, and he did raid but he raided Chinese boats. He didn't raid the British ships. He raided Chinese boats.
Thank you. Thank you, Maxim.
Okay, thank you all. I would just like to remind you that we had to reschedule Professor Clifford Sutter's presentation for, so it will be happening coming Sunday. So we apologize. We know it's a Sunday and quite early. It will be 8 a.m. on Sunday in Thailand. So I believe 9 in Singapore.
9 a.m.
Yeah, and we would like to take this opportunity after his presentation to have a round talk discussion about guidelines for possible book and collective book based on some of the many discussions we had during these 4 sessions. So if you can be there, that would be very nice.
Yeah.
And so see you all on Sunday.
See you on Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
So after we stop streaming, can we have